Chapter 785. The sun was warm. In front of the listening tower, a table was set up. The scholar, the fisherman, and the pig raiser sat around the table. Muse painting stood by the side obediently. On the table, there were fish, meat, wine, and dishes. The delicacies in immortal wine looked and tasted good. Muse painting looked steadily forward. However, he was drooling in his heart. Mr. Wren's fish was his favorite immortal spiritual food. What's more, it was steamed today. Muse painting, come and sit down. Don't you like my fish the most? Mr. Wren said with a smile. Mr. Wren, it's true that Muse painting likes your fish, but I can't break the rules. There are so many of you here, how can I sit? Muse painting replied respectfully. Mr. Wren nodded when he heard that. In that case, I'll give you a fish. Coincidentally, I have one in my fish basket. Take it. Oh, Muse painting's eyes lit up when he heard that. Thank you, Mr. Wren. Looking again, Mr. Wren waved his hand. A streak of golden light flew out of the fish basket next to him. Seeing this, Muse hurriedly raised her hand and put away the golden light. Fisherman, you're spoiling him a little. Aren't you afraid that he won't be able to digest your fish? The scholar looked at Mr. Wren and said, Young master, I'll share a few more times. Don't worry. Muse painting immediately said, I won't be greedy. Hee. That's right. Mr. Wren waved his hand. Muse painting, you're not needed here. Go and get your own fish to eat. But you really have to be careful. Okay. Muse painting looked at the scholar again. The scholar nodded. Only then did the maid leave happily. Scholar, this Muse painting is really good. After Muse painting left, Mr. Wren said again, he's smart and sensible and talented. The scholar said, Muse painting is okay. In a few years, he'll probably be able to take charge. His talent is indeed very high. Will you pass your world listening tower to him in the future? The butcher who reared pigs laughed. That's not up to me. The scholar shook his head. I'm only in charge of the world listening tower. It's not my property either. However, if it's my recommendation, I can consider helping you paint. However, who knows when that will happen? Miju hasn't even traversed the various realms. She's still far from it. Mr. Wren and Butcher both nodded. Wanting to manage this world listening tower was not what ordinary people could do. She was just a little flower in a greenhouse. Have you finished your painting? Asked Mr. Wren. The scholar smiled. The assistant drew one, and I thought it wasn't bad, so added 2 more strokes. Why did you suddenly think of painting? Butcher asked with a frown. Could it be that something big has happened in the infinite worlds? Why do I feel that nothing good ever happens when you paint? Could it be that you're painting wind, rain, thunder, lightning, and many stars this time? The scholar waved his hand. Pig rearing, don't talk nonsense. You make it seem like I'm causing chaos in the infinite worlds every day. I'm someone who knows my place. Actually, this time, I was only entrusted by someone to set up an array. Oh, Mr. Wren and Butcher were stunned. Asking you to set up an array? That's a big deal. Mr. Wren smiled. Who asked you to paint? Who did you paint for? Butcher asked directly. Windmill's people. The scholar smiled. Windmill's people have always been on good terms with us. I can't brush them off, can I? Besides, it's just a small effort. Windmill scholar asked you for help. Butcher asked. We're all in the same trade. The scholar smiled. My ass. Butcher said disapprovingly. In my opinion, you're all poor. None of you use literature to show off your knowledge. Actually, you're all hypocritical scholars. How can you compare to us pig rearing? The scholar smiled. Speaking of rearing pigs, Butcher, why do I feel that your pigs aren't as good as Boss Windmill's pigs? His pigs seem to be better reared than yours. They're all mighty and majestic. Nonsense, Butcher said angrily. My pigs are domestic pigs. I reared them to eat meat. How can his messy pigs compare mine? I don't believe that his pork tastes better than mine. Isn't the purpose of rearing pigs for meat? Raising pigs as pets is a blasphemy to pig rearing. Mr. Wren nodded repeatedly. And then, seeing that Butcher was angry, the scholar picked up a pig's hand and took a bite. He smiled. That's right. In fact, the butcher's pork tastes the best. Come, let's drink. That's more like it. Butcher's anger turned into joy. The three of them picked up their wine bowls and drank it in one gulp. Scholar, your wine isn't that good. Mr. Rin frowned. Didn't I ask Maid Hua to tell you to prepare the wine? And, really? The scholar pretended to be ignorant. Maid Hua only said to prepare the wine, but didn't say to prepare the wine? Mr. Rin was speechless. He understood that Maid Hua wouldn't be as stingy as the scholar. Hee hee, Angler, it's good enough that we can drink the scholar's wine. Butcher said, why don't you think about it? Who else in our village can come to the scholar's place to drink some wine and get him 2 vegetarian dishes? Nonsense. The scholar wasn't happy. Last time, when Aunt Hua came to send flowers, I asked her to stay for a meal. Mr. Run was amused. You still have the nerve to mention Aunt Hua. She's the person that Butcher is thinking about. You still want to ask her to stay for a meal? Are you plotting something? I'm plotting something. The scholar looked at Butcher and said, Pig rearing, I've been worried about you. I'm trying to matchmake you two, and it's also because of you that I asked Aunt Hua to stay. Nonsense. Butcher drank a mouthful of wine. Do you believe what you said? The scholar was speechless, because he really didn't believe it. Who asked Aunt Hua to be so beautiful? All the men in the village, except for Mr. Run, probably wanted to take a second look at Aunt Hua. By the way, who is the person that windmill scholar asked you to help? Mr. Run asked. A small cultivator. It said that he used to be the lotus soul of the 3 realms. The scholar said, I helped him draw the revered trapping array to help him become a venerable. The 3 realms. Mr. Rin couldn't help but nod and said playfully, when I was fishing, I also encountered the aura of the 3 realms. It seems that it's a very special world. However, it was destroyed in the process of evolution. It didn't shatter naturally. Actually, it met a purifier. The scholar said, Purifier. Hee hee. Mr. Rin laughed coldly. Sigh. Who cares? Butcher shouted. It's good that nothing big happened. Previously, I was worried that once the scholar started painting, there would be a bloody storm. Now, I'm relieved. Come, drink, drink. The 3 of them stopped talking about the various realms. Instead, they talked about Mulberry Maiden, Aunt Hua, fishing, and pig rearing. At this moment, if a mortal passed by, he would definitely feel a sense of familiarity, because they really didn't have any immortal intent on them. They only talked about trivial matters such as needlework and mulberry. Immortal intent, mortal intent, who could really say for sure? Who knew that the scholar's casual sketches would trap Sumo for more than 1,000 years? Chapter 786. Soul Storage Altar Cave Abode. Little White Pig was playing around. Black Feather God Hong was dozing off on one leg. Yi Wuhui stared blankly at Sumo, while Sumo sat cross-legged and cultivated. In the blink of an eye, 30 years had passed. Most of the time, it was like this. Everyone's lives looked monotonous, but they each took what they needed and did not interfere with each other. Little White Pig seemed to be addicted to it ever since it turned into a little white dog. Sometimes kittens, puppies, and even 2 little white pigs would suddenly appear in the cave abode. The guy had actually started to skillfully develop and use the cloning skill. Yi Wuhui sometimes couldn't even tell which one was the real little white pig. This made little white pig proud for a long time, playing even more happily. In the end, it dared to use a clone to provoke Black Feather God Hong. In the end, Black Feather God Hong ignored the clone and poked the little white pigs, but with his long beak. Even though little white pig had thick skin, Black Feather God Hong still poked a deep bloody mark. A purplish-red lump appeared on the white, and it only faded after 3 years. From then on, Little White Pig was much more restrained and no longer showed off. In the blink of an eye, another 30 years passed. On this day, Sumo's body emitted a faint, mysterious light. Little White Pig stopped playing and looked at Sumo. Black-feathered God Hong also opened his eyes. Yi Wuhui's spirits were also lifted. After all, Sumo had been meditating for 60 years. Advancement. Little White Pig had seen this before. Previously, Sumo was in the Rebirth Realm level 5. It seemed that she had advanced to the Rebirth Realm level 6 this time. 60 years was not fast for Sumo. Whoosh! Then, Sumo let out a turbid breath and opened her eyes. Have you reached the 6th rebirth realm? Yi Wuhui asked. Yes. Sumo nodded. I'm at the 6th level of the rebirth realm now. Then Sumo picked some immortal fruits and gave them to the little white pig and the black feathered deity Hong. I'll go out and take a look. All of you just wait here. With that, Sumo's figure moved, and she had already left the cave. You go and have a look. Yi Wuhui hurriedly said. The little white pig heard this and immediately followed him out. This was because only the little white pig and Sumo could freely enter and exit the soul storage altar. However, an hour later, both the man and the pig returned. How is it? Yi Wuhui asked. Sumo shook her head and smiled bitterly. It's still the same. Although my realm has increased a little, the grand array hasn't changed at all. I come and go exactly as I did before. The little white pig also nodded at the side. Yi Wuhui nodded. It seems that I still need to continue cultivating, but I need to refine a furnace of elixirs first. This way, I could try to break through to the 7th eternal realm within 100 years. Sumo said. Sumo, can I help you with anything? Yi Wuhui asked. No need. Sumo smiled. If you can, you should solidify your soul. Unfortunately, you can't cultivate now. Otherwise, this would definitely be a good place. The little white pig also looked at Sumo and asked. As long as you don't make trouble, you'll be helping, Sumo said. When the little white pig heard this, he snorted in dissatisfaction. At this time, Sumo walked to the flower garden and began to pick out herbs. This time, he wanted to refine the Shengzheng pill. The Shengzheng pill was a top reincarnation elixir. This kind of elixir, in fact, could be considered an empty recipe, but almost no one could refine it. This was because it was only useful for cultivators below the 7th reincarnation realm, but whether a cultivator in the 7th reincarnation realm could prepare all the herbs was another matter. Even if they had the herbs, they might not have the ability to refine the elixir. Reincarnation level elixir did not mean that a reincarnation realm cultivator could refine it. However, this was not a problem for Sumo. There was almost everything in the flower garden. As for the method of refining elixirs, Sumo did not need to master it all, because he had the hidden soul cauldron. Yi Wuhui watched Sumo pick the herbs, wondering what kind of elixir Sumo was going to refine. How to refine elixirs? He had never seen Sumo refine elixirs. When the little white pig heard that Sumo was going to refine elixirs, it was already jumping with joy. This was because the mist from refining elixirs was a great supplement for it. Not long after, Sumo finished gathering the herbs, plus some things from the Cosmos sack. She had all the ingredients. Sumo, what kind of elixir are you going to refine? Yi Wuhui asked. This was because she also knew that ordinary elixirs were almost useless for reincarnation realm cultivators. Ascension elixir, Sumo said casually. Ascension elixir? Yi Wuhui heard Bu Miaotian mention this kind of elixir before. You can refine ascension elixirs? Then what level is your alchemy skills? What level? Sumo was taken aback. I don't have a level. You dare to refine ascension elixirs without a level? Yi Wuhui said. Huh. Sumo thought for a while and said, then I might be at the invincible realm. Currently, there is no elixir that I can't refine as long as I have the herbs and the elixir recipe. Invincible realm? Yi Wuhui could not help but be speechless. He looked again and saw Sumo carrying a pile of herbs directly into the stone house. The little white pig, on the other hand, was full of confidence as it followed behind Sumo. Yi Wuhui did not ask any more questions and just stared blankly. Sumo entered the stone house and took out a broken bowl from her Cosmos bag. Yi Wuhui was even more stunned when he saw this. Why would she use a broken bowl to refine elixirs? But then she saw Sumo throw the broken bowl tray directly on the stove. The broken bowl instantly turned into a soul depository cauldron. It was neither too big nor too small, and it just happened to sit on the stove. The runes on it faintly flowed. Elixir cauldron? Yi Wuhui's heart skipped a beat. However, Sumo's cauldron was clearly a cauldron. It did not even have a lid. While Yi Wuhui was surprised, Sumo had already thrown all the herbs into the soul depository cauldron. This scene made Yi Wuhui dumbfounded. Of course, she knew how to refine elixirs. However, She had never seen anyone refine elixirs like Sumo. Was this the alchemy of the invincible realm? Yi Wu could not help but look at the little white pig who was already drooling. Humph! Are you sure your master is refining elixirs? Humph! The little white pig nodded, because it was not the first time it saw such a scene. Humph! Yi Wu frowned and said, but I always feel that he seems to be cooking. Do you think he will throw you into that cauldron and stew you later? Humph! The little white pig could not help but lower its eyelids and look at Yi Wu. These words were too hurtful to the pig. Sumo, don't you use fire to refine elixirs? Yi Wu asked Sumo again. No need. Sumo said, it will be done in a while. It will be done in a while. Yi Wu said, I heard that one ascension pill takes 49 years to refine. Therefore, ordinary cultivators cannot refine it at all. And then, Sumo was also not in the mood to explain to Yi Wu. Chi. Who? As the medicinal ingredients entered the cauldron, white fog continuously rose from it. The little white pig's face was filled with intoxication as its body floated along with the white fog. That kind of feeling was not to mention free and unfettered. After Sumo finished putting in all the medicinal ingredients, she directly lay down on the stone bed and did not even look at the cauldron again. Because she did not need to look at it at all. She was refining elixirs automatically. At this time, Yi Wu stood at the side in a daze. She only saw the white fog rising from the ancient cauldron, and there was no fire. All of this was somewhat beyond her understanding. She did not know how many hours had passed, but it was definitely less than a day. The white fog gradually dissipated, and the little white pig's belly bulged. Ding, ding, dang, dang. Inside the cauldron, the sound of metal clashing resounded. Looking again, a 5-colored elixir directly floated at the mouth of the cauldron. Brilliance radiated in all directions, illuminating the entire stone house. A top-grade ascension pill, Lienbois. At that moment, Yi Wu was certain. That ancient cauldron was definitely the other Lienbois on Sumo. Chapter 787. A 5-colored brilliance spread out. With a clang, the ascension pill floated in the mouth of the soul depository cauldron, while the little white pig fell on the windowsill. Because the white mist was gone, the little fellow ate until its belly bulged and almost jumped up. Sumo stood up and reached out with one hand, grabbing the ascension pill. The pill was the size of a glutinous rice ball. Among all the pills that Sumo had refined, it could be said to be the largest. Light circulated on it, and it was full of spiritual energy. The power it contained was definitely incomparable to the previous pills. The little white pig looked at the pill and drooled. Unfortunately, the pill was not its food. However, the pill was too delicious. Supreme Ascension Pill? Yi Wu asked to confirm. That's right. Sumo looked at the pill in his hand and was very satisfied. The soul depository pill must be of the highest quality. This pill would definitely help him break through to the 7th stage of the rebirth realm. However, Sumo did not use it immediately. Instead, he kept it in his cosmos pouch. He wanted to wait until he cultivated to the point where he could break through in one go. Sumo, this ancient cauldron is also Lienbois, right? Yi Wu looked at the soul depository cauldron and said, it can actually refine pills by itself. Soul depository cauldron. Sumo pointed at the words on the soul depository cauldron. It should be Lienbois. Moreover, not only can it refine pills, it can also refine low-quality pills into high-quality ones. Amazing, Yi Wu praised. However, I still want to try and see if it can refine divine weapons. As she spoke, Sumo directly took out 3 fiery red flying daggers from her cosmos pouch. These flying daggers were rotating flying daggers. They were obtained from the chaotic god continent, but they were only of the deity's tribulation level. Sumo casually threw the 3 flying daggers into the soul depository cauldron. He did not have much hope. Chi. In fact, Sumo had previously tried to use the soul depository cauldron to refine a magic weapon, but she had not succeeded. This was the first time since the fusion of the soul depository cauldron. However, as soon as the flying dagger entered, smoke rose. Sumo's eyes couldn't help but light up. One had to know that he didn't have any reaction before. However, the smoke was not white, but grayish-black. Oomph. The little white pig frowned and left with a snort, because it didn't like the grayish-black mist anymore. Are you being picky? Sumo laughed. The little white pig looked at Sumo adorably. The black fog was not tasty. Then it twisted its little butt and walked to the side of the ancient celestial bathing lotus to sleep soundly. It seemed that it had eaten its fill just now. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At this moment, the soul depository cauldron began to buzz. Sumo took a look and saw that the 3 flying daggers inside were long gone. Only a red light was circulating rapidly in the soul depository cauldron. However, suddenly the soul depository cauldron seemed to be on strike and was swaying left and right. Sumo was stunned. It seems to be asking for food. Yi Wu Hui reminded her. It wants to eat? Sumo couldn't help but be stunned. Because in the past, the broken copper bowl did need to eat spirit stones to evolve, but later on, refining pills no longer needed spirit stones. Could it be that it needed to refine divine weapons and magic weapons again? Sumo had the mentality of giving it a try. With a wave of her hand, she threw out a supreme-grade spirit stone. The current Sumo was not the same as before. She could be said to be generous. Back then, he had been throwing out low-grade spirit stones one by one. However, this supreme-grade spirit stone was basically like a clay ox entering the sea without a sound. However, it was indeed absorbed. It was too fast, and there was almost no trace. The soul depository cauldron was still swaying left and right, even a bit like a roly-poly doll. Sumo was stunned. Then she smiled and said, "Not enough." With another wave of her hand, Sumo directly threw in 100 supreme-grade spirit stones. Chi-chi, whoosh whoosh, those supreme-grade spirit stones instantly disappeared into the soul depository cauldron. At the same time, white fog gradually rose and began to neutralize the dark gray fog. However, the soul depository cauldron was still buzzing and swaying left and right. When Sumo saw this, her face couldn't help but become serious. Because swallowing supreme-grade spirit stones like this meant that the soul depository cauldron indeed needed spirit stones. According to her previous experience, the soul depository cauldron would never swallow spirit stones for nothing. It would either upgrade or refine it. Sumo, give me more. Didn't you win a supreme-grade spirit stone mine from me? Yi Wu Hui said. Okay. Sumo directly threw the cosmos sack in the void. Whoosh, thousands of supreme-grade spirit stones poured down, and at that moment, it was like a waterfall of supreme-grade spirit stones. A pale yellow light shone on the entire back cave. These supreme-grade spirit stones were basically obtained from the bet between him and Gue Ying, who was also Yi Wu Hui. Later, as Sumo's cultivation level increased, he rarely used it. That mine, he couldn't bring it with him. Later, it was used for the construction of Sioux City. Chi. Whoosh. Looking again, the soul depository cauldron shook and suddenly became as big as a basin. Its ability to swallow spirit stones also immediately increased. Thick white fog rose from the cauldron. However, it was still buzzing. There were about 20,000 supreme-grade spirit stones on Sumo. If this was a cultivator below the rebirth state, it would be a considerable amount of wealth. In less than a quarter of an hour, a total of 20,000 supreme-grade spirit stones fell into the soul depository cauldron. Then, the soul depository cauldron finally stopped buzzing. No more spirit stones fell into it, and it no longer absorbed them. Keep. Sumo's mind moved, and she put away the cosmos sack. 20,000 supreme-grade spirit stones. Sumo didn't feel bad about it. However, he wanted to see to what extent the soul depository cauldron could refine a deity's tribulation class treasure. Deity burying class? Break world class? Sumo guessed in his heart. The white fog lingered, and the black gas rose again. The soul depository cauldron itself didn't change, but the red light inside it began to spin quickly. Then it solidified bit by bit. From start to finish, the whole process lasted for 6 hours. Compared to refining elixirs, this speed was much slower. It seemed that refining a treasure was even more difficult. Oomph. The little white pig closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Sumo was still staring at the soul depository cauldron. At that moment, all the fog began to dissipate. It seemed that he was about to succeed. Ding! There was a crisp sound inside the soul depository cauldron. When he looked again, a red light flew out. A small flying knife that was 3 inches long, with a circle in the middle and 2 ends like crescent moons, was floating in front of Sumo. Sumo frowned. The flying knife was small and exquisite, but it didn't look that special. Sumo raised her hand and held it in her palm. She spat out some spirit chi. Wow! After the spirit chi was poured into it, the flying knife emitted a sky full of light. An endless pressure spread out. Yi Wuhui's face changed. He quickly took 3 steps back. That was because the murderous pressure could hurt her. Venerable God weapon. Sumo's face suddenly changed. At the same time, she immediately locked its power. It had never occurred to Su Mo and Yi Wuhui that the 3 deities' tribulation-level flying daggers they had thrown into the cave would be refined into venerable divine weapons. That was unbelievable. Before this, Sumo thought it would be good if a deity's tribulation treasure could become deity burying class or breakworld class. But they didn't expect the soul depository cauldron to be so overbearing. Deity's tribulation could reach venerable level. It was unimaginable and unimaginable. Compared to a venerable god weapon, 20,000 top-grade spirit stones were not worth mentioning. Sumo, I feel that after we get out of the formation, we should go straight back to the Pure Land and take back the top-grade mine. Yi Wuhui said in a daze. Yes. Sumo looked at the venerable flying knife and nodded. I think so too. Chapter 788. Venerable Level Flying Knife. The flying knife was less than 3 inches long and as thin as a cicada's wing, but it shone brightly. 3 deity tribulation magic treasures and 20,000 supreme-grade spirit stones could be made into a venerable divine weapon. It was like exchanging a piece of wood for an entire forest. Such an effect was enough to drive people crazy. Sumo hurriedly took out 2 more deity tribulation magic treasures from her cosmos bag. Now, deity tribulation magic treasures were of little value to Sumo. This time, it was 2 flying swords. After he threw them in, the soul-storing altar directly turned them into 2 rays of green light and then began to shake again. It was almost the same process as before. Alas, Sumo shook her head and looked at Yi Wu Dao. It seems that every sacrificial refinement requires spirit stones. Otherwise, it can't be sacrificial refined. In this case, we really have to go back and move the mines. Yi Wuhui rolled his eyes at Sumo and said, Sumo, you're greedy. A supreme-grade spirit mine can't even be exchanged for a venerable divine weapon. Do you want to use 20,000 supreme-grade spirit stones to forge countless venerable divine weapons? Actually, I really want that. Sumo sighed, then waved her hand and directly put away the soul-storing altar. She simply did not refine the deity tribulation immortal sword anymore, because Sumo did not have many spirit stones left. It's still not perfect. Sumo sighed. Yi Wuhui was speechless. Whoever obtained this soul-storing cauldron would probably be crazy with joy, but Sumo actually said that it was not perfect. It seemed that people who had ruled a great world really had a different outlook. In fact, Sumo was just joking. Of course, he knew what kind of treasure this soul-storing cauldron was. However, without a realm, only having a divine weapon was useless. Moreover, Sumo still had some doubts in his heart. He was a little not sure that the soul-storing cauldron could be used to forge venerable divine weapons in batches. It must have some kind of restriction, but he had not discovered it yet. Otherwise, the 3 realms would have been flooded with venerable divine weapons. If the white-robed guardian king casually forged a divine armament, how could that be? This was the main reason why Sumo did not pursue refining divine weapons. I'm going to break through to the 7th layer rebirth realm. It may take some time. Stay in the cave and don't move around. When Sumo said this, She looked at the little white pig. Oomph. The little white pig nodded sensibly. However, Sumo was still a little worried. Missy, look at it. Right now, the situation of the grand formation outside was unclear. Sumo said, let's talk about everything after I advance. Yes. Okay. Yi Wuhui nodded without any interest. If you want to run around, I'll put you in my storage pouch and seal you for 1,000 years. Sumo said to the little white pig. Oomph. The little white pig pouted in dissatisfaction. However, it really wanted to sneak out for a walk just now. Only then did it give up on that idea. After that, Sumo walked out of the stone house and went directly to the place where the front and back caves were connected. She sat cross-legged. Soon, Sumo entered a meditative state. That kind of meditative state was to forget oneself and everything else. Although he was in the cave, in reality, it could be considered an existence of a different world from the cave. Yi Wuhui looked at the little white pig, and the little white pig also looked at Yi Wuhui. The man and the pig looked at each other without saying anything. Finally, the little white pig walked over and lay at Yi Wuhui's feet, sleeping soundly. Yi Wuhui stared at Sumo intently. In the distance, Heiyu Shunhong stood there with his eyes closed. No one knew if he was really asleep or just pretending to sleep. The entire soul storage altar cave was very quiet. Of course, the little white pig's snores were very loud. The snores were very disproportionate to its cute appearance. As time passed, the cave was peaceful and all things grew. The hurricane lilies and immortal bathing ancient lotus grew quietly. The immortal herbs and spirit trees in the flower garden were still full of life. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. In the blink of an eye, another 100 years had passed. In fact, when one cultivated to a certain level, the change in time would become a little blurred. In fact, some mighty figures had completely forgotten about time, because they had already jumped out of the fence of time. Just like AMU back then, when he left the three realms, he had actually already been able to control time. There was no sun or moon in the mountains. It was probably like that. True immortals were all detached from time. Therefore, 200 years was not a long time for both Yi Wuhui and the little white pig. During this time, Yi Wuhui spent most of his time looking at Sumo. Occasionally, she would also cultivate. However, her realm could only stop at the peak of the one lifetime immortal realm. Her soul body couldn't be upgraded. She could only make it slightly more solid. In the end, when he was bored, Yi Wuhui began to make puppets. There was no five-color divine soil in the soul storage altar, but the soil, stone, and wood here were far superior. They could all be top puppet materials. Of course, those things were limited. Yi Wuhui could not make puppets. He could only make small objects and dolls. This way, he could play with the little white pig and the black feather deity and kill time. Sumo's cultivation continued. The entire soul storage altar could provide her with an endless supply of spirit energy. This was very special. Although Sumo's cultivation technique was special, she still needed the support of spirit energy. That kind of need could be said to be endless. However, even so, Yi Wuhui did not feel that the spirit energy in the soul storage altar had thinned. The spirit energy here had always been extremely dense. Now, Yi Wuhui could not see Sumo's cultivation progress. However, the entire Sumo looked very peaceful and calm. That was a good thing for cultivation. So, in the blink of an eye, another 40 years had passed. In a blink of an eye, it had been 300 years since they returned to the soul storage altar. Inside the soul storage altar, several small animals appeared. However, they were all puppets. On this day, Sumo's body once again glowed with a mysterious light, and the ascension pill directly flew out of the cosmos bag. Sumo did not open his eyes, but opened his mouth. The ascension pill flew directly into his mouth. A pill of that level melted in his mouth. In an instant, a five-colored brilliance rose from Sumo's body. The brilliance of the ascension pill seemed to be transferred to Sumo's body. Promotion? The little white pig woke up, and the black feather deity watched from a distance. Yi Wuhui looked a little nervous, because he understood that no matter what kind of cultivator every promotion actually meant risk, even if Sumo was awakened. At this time, the space around Sumo was a little strange. However, Sumo's expression was as usual. It was just that the aura on his body was changing. At that moment, Sumo was like a sea stabilizing needle, and below him was a vast sea. In fact, it was indeed so. At this moment, Sumo's Dansi was surging, and the power of the Ascension Pill was helping Sumo complete the final sprint. Sixth Rebirth Realm. Sixth Rebirth Realm, Perfection Realm. Seventh Rebirth Realm, Breakthrough. However, Sumo's realm was still increasing, approaching the seventh Rebirth Realm, Perfection Realm. Chapter 789. Complete Rebirth Realm Level 7. This realm should have exceeded Sumo's expectations. However, it was impossible for him to break through to Rebirth Realm Level 8 in one go. After all, there was a huge gap between each realm of rebirth. The waves in the pill sea gradually calmed down. Sumo opened his eyes. Sumo, Yiwuhui called out, "How is it?" Oomph. The little white pig also came over. Complete Rebirth Realm Level 7. Sumo stood up and sighed softly. He should say that he was satisfied with this result. From Rebirth Realm Level 5 to Rebirth Realm Level 7 in 300 years. This was definitely a speed that many cultivators could not match. Based on this speed, there was still hope for him to reach the martial honor realm in the remaining 1,000 years. However, Sumo always felt that if he continued to cultivate like this, he seemed to have lost something. An indescribable feeling lingered in Sumo's heart. "What's wrong?" Yi Wuhui asked. "Nothing." Sumo frowned and then looked at Yi Wuhui. "However, I want to go into the array to take a look. Come with me." "Okay." Yi Wuhui was very happy. "Oomph." The little white pig leaped up. Sumo nodded and then waved her hand to put the black feather God Hong into the cosmos sack. The little puppets made by Yi Wuhui temporarily stayed in the cave abode. In any case, if there were no changes, they would return immediately. Yi Wuhui moved his mind and entered Sumo's sea of consciousness. The little white pig landed on Sumo's shoulder. After all, it was an existence that could come and go freely. Whoosh, Sumo's figure moved and directly left the cave abode of the soul storage altar. By now, Sumo was already familiar with this magical footwork. In fact, he could even stay in any world he wanted. It was just that the honorable trapping formation had restricted him, preventing him from moving around freely. After 49 steps, Sumo returned to the array. Then, he summoned the demonic boat and had Yi Wuhui stand on it. Nothing had changed in front of him. It was still the same scattered stars zone, empty and vacant. No matter where Sumo went, she couldn't get out. It was a maze with no exit. The little white pig's spiritual sense was extraordinary. It had also been holding its nose, trying to find a way to get out of here. However, it was also impossible. This grand formation seemed to be invulnerable and perfectly sealed. It's still the same. It hasn't changed at all. Sumo sighed. However, that indescribable feeling from before surged up again. He had a feeling that he had overlooked something. This formation isn't harmful at all. But why does it have to trap us? Sumo looked at the grand formation and said to Yi Wuhui, "Oh." Yi Wuhui smiled. "Didn't we talk about this before? The person who set up this grand formation doesn't want to kill you. Otherwise, it would be as easy as flipping his hand to kill you. The person who set up this formation only wants to trap you. Perhaps when you reach the honorable realm, you will naturally be able to walk out of this grand formation." Hee. Sumo shook her head. "But I suddenly feel that this doesn't make sense." "Oh, why?" Yi Wuhui said. "Previously, we speculated that the other party's goal is to trap us. They might be a friend and not an enemy. But what's the point of trapping us?" Sumo smiled bitterly. "This is an honorable trapping formation." Sumo continued to frown. "As long as I can't become an honorable realm, I might not be able to get out. That means that the other party is certain that you will become an honorable realm." Yi Wuhui smiled. "That's exactly the problem," Sumo said. "How does the person who set up this formation know that I will become an honorable realm?" Even if I'm a samsara traveler of the three realms, the reincarnation of the underworld lord and the demon king, do I have to become an honorable realm? You have to know that among the samsara travelers of the three realms in the galaxy, how many of them are like Xing Fei, who regard reincarnation as a normal thing? Apart from Xing Fei, which one of them did not experience difficulties before awakening and continuing to cultivate? Most of them have not reached the realm they were at back in the day after hundreds of thousands of years. Isn't that right? But you are special, Yiwu Hui said. Special? Hee hee. Sumo smiled self-mockingly and shook her head. Actually, special is relative. I used to think that I was the one in charge of everything. But now it seems that I'm just an existence that others look down on. No one knows how many so-called supreme beings there are in the various realms. In the three realms, I'm the underworld lord and the demon king. But when I came to the hidden realm, didn't someone use a pen to trap me here? AMU created the galaxy, but wasn't he also sealed in the Lazuli world? So, there's nothing special about us. As long as the world is big enough, we are all ordinary beings. Sumo's tone was a little heavy, but that was indeed how he felt at the moment. In this life, his mentality was different from that of the underworld lord and the demon king. He no longer thought that he was superior and could control everything. He was just a cultivator who strived for the top and did not want to be a puppet. Hearing Sumo's words, Yiwu Hui was speechless for a long time. Sumo was right, because people could not always think about controlling and changing others. In this world, the only thing that they could truly control was themselves. As powerful as Bu Miaoyan was, he created countless puppets and controlled many things. But what could he change? I keep feeling that there's something that I haven't understood. Sumo said. What is it? Yiwu Hui said. That's the true goal of the cultivator who set up this formation. Sumo said. Yiwu Hui was a little confused. The person who set up the formation definitely doesn't know that I can enter an incomparably mystical soul altar cave abode, right? Sumo asked. That shouldn't be a problem. Yiwu Hui smiled. After all, I don't really understand how you could have such a cave abode. Other than Guanxiong, is there no one else who knows about this cave abode? Yes. Sumo nodded. But Guanxiong only came here once. He doesn't know the specifics. Actually, in these 300 years, if I didn't have the soul altar cave abode, I wouldn't have been able to reach the peak of the 7th level of the rebirth realm. Because I couldn't have refined the ascension pill, nor could I have an endless supply of spiritual energy. That's right. Yiwu Hui frowned. In other words, all of this was definitely not within the consideration of the cultivator who set up the formation. Yes. Sumo nodded. But the other party was so sure that you could break the formation, or that you could reach the venerable realm and leave the formation. Yiwu Hui turned to look at Sumo and asked. Yes. Sumo also looked at Yiwu Hui. Her eyes slightly brightened. That should be the case. The possibility of the person who set up the formation wanting to hurt me is very small, and he wouldn't be so bored as to randomly trap me. Therefore, there must be a deeper meaning behind this formation. Previously, I seem to have neglected this point, and had always used the soul altar cave abode as my escape route. Actually, the secret and the exit should be within the formation. That makes sense. Yiwu Hui looked around and nodded heavily. But what exactly is contained within this formation? I can't see anything. Sumo's eyes were also blank. However, within that blankness, there was a kind of determination. And at this moment, suddenly, from the void, a ray of light that covered the sky suddenly flew over. It was at least 100 feet long, like a knife or a hook, and it headed straight for Sumo. Chapter 790. Guanshi Lake. Mr. N was fishing as usual. He wore a bamboo hat and squinted his eyes. Inside Guanshi Lake, a white lotus stood gracefully, the water rippling slightly. It was still a good day. However, it was said that the weather in this small village was clear every day, and the wind was gentle. If lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, and the wind and rain darkened the sky, then things would get serious. Mr. N looked at the fish bladder then at the wooden bridge on Guanshur Lake. Today, it was unusually quiet. There were few people walking around. Sang Nu, who often crossed the bridge, did not appear either. It seemed like her silkworms did not lack food. Mr. Rin looked at Baishan in the distance and smiled faintly. However, the smile was meaningful. No one could tell what it meant. At this moment, footsteps could be heard. The footsteps were neither fast nor slow, and they landed lightly. The person seemed to be afraid of startling the fish in Guanshur Lake. Mr. Ren did not turn around. He said loudly, "Maid Hua, it's fine. If the fish can be startled, it's not a fish that can be hooked." Maid Hua smiled and walked to Mr. Ren's side. Then she bowed deeply. Maid Hua greets Mr. Ren. Let's dispense with the formalities." Mr. Ren smiled. "Why? Are you looking for me? Usually, you don't come to Guanshur Lake to play. I don't know how to swim. I'm afraid of falling into the lake." Maid Hua said awkwardly, "So I don't dare to come if there's nothing." Mr. Ren heard and laughed. "It's fine. If you fall into the lake, I'll fish you up with a swing of my fishing rod." "No." Maid Hua waved her hand. "Once I enter the lake, I won't know which world I'm in. When you fish me up, I won't even know who I am." Mr. Ren nodded and joked. "That makes sense. Maid Hua, you better be careful. This lake can be so greedy that it might sweep you away again." "I'm not afraid as long as I'm by your side." Maid Hua said sweetly, "You've guarded Guanshur Lake. How can this lake water get close to you?" Mr. Ren laughed and said, "So it was your young master who asked you to come here today, right?" Sure, Hua smiled. "My young master has something to ask of you." "Oh, does the scholar have something to ask of me?" Mr. Ren couldn't help but be stunned. That magical brush of his can settle the universe, and a world can be created with one stroke. What can I do to help him? Whatever he can't do, I probably can't either. In this matter, Mr. Ren will definitely be able to help. Muse Hua smiled. "My young master wants you to help keep an eye on someone, because he can't find that person. Who is he looking for?" Mr. Ren laughed. "I'm indeed better than him at finding people, as long as you know which realm he is in. A lotus soul of the 3 realms. Sure, Hua said. "The lotus soul of 3 realms?" Mr. Ren said, "Where is it sealed in the glaze realm?" "In that case, I can't help you observe. I don't want to look for trouble." "No," Sure Hua hurriedly said. "The lotus soul of the 3 realms is special. Aren't there 2? My young master is looking for the other one, which is the cultivator that he trapped with the painting array a few days ago." "The person that Windmill Village asked him to take care of?" Mr. Ren said. "Yes." Sure Hua said, 3 days ago, my young master trapped him in the painting array. But after investigating today, he couldn't find any trace of him." "Oh, he got out of the array?" Mr. Ren was stunned. "How can that be?" Sure Hua shook her head and said, "You know my young master's magical brush painting array. Unless the people from the few villages in Luofan town get out, how many can break the array in the various realms? What's more, the lotus soul of 3 realms hasn't reached the stage of lotus transformation. How could he escape? With that kind of cultivation, not to mention my young master, even I can trap him to death. Then why did he disappear?" Mr. Ren said. Sure Hua scratched his head and said, "My young master is also surprised. He can guarantee that the lotus soul didn't get out of the array, but he can't sense his existence. So, he asked me to come to you and help take a look." This is a bit interesting." Mr. Ren nodded. "Which world is the lotus soul of 3 realms in?" "Hidden," Sure Hua said. "Good." Mr. Ren nodded again. Then he looked at the entire observation lake. The observation lake could see the state of the myriad realms. Mr. Ren didn't make any extra movements, but just cast his eyes on a lotus in the observation lake. At that moment, Mr. Ren's eyes were a bit special, because he had a pair of special heavenly eyes. The lotus that his eyes fell on was one of the more conspicuous ones, even among the many lotuses. And not far from it, there was a lotus that was almost withered. "Appear!" Mr. Ren shouted softly. Whoosh! When he looked again, the water ripples under the lotus swayed slightly. In an instant, the other lotuses on the entire lake completely disappeared. The scene on the lake changed, and what was reflected was the sky full of stars. Moreover, the star map was still constantly changing. The entire lake was flowing, as if it was constantly expanding and searching in detail. A big world, a medium world, a star region, a small world. Whoosh, whoosh. Finally, the scene on the lake was fixed on the broken star zone. Any cultivator outside Luo-Fan Town would be shocked to see this scene, because only the people in a few villages in Luo-Fan Town had seen such a scene. Is it here? Mr. Ren asked. Yes, it's here. Sure, Hua said. Young master said that he changed my graffiti into a big array. Look, where's the prototype of my ink? On the surface of the lake, the stars were dotted, and in the broken star zone, there was a black fog intertwining. It really was like an ink brush, randomly drawing tangled ink marks on a piece of white paper. That star region had been completely blocked by the black fog. Sure, Hua, your painting skills are good, Mr. Ren said. Mr. Run, you praise me too much, Sure, Hua said. At this time, Mr. Ren's eyes narrowed. Looking again, the black fog on the lake dispersed layer by layer, and the images of Sumo and Yiwu Hue on the magic boat had been completely revealed. Isn't this them? Mr. Ren asked. Aren't they in the big array? Sure, Hua was stunned. It should be them. My young master's big array can't trap other cultivators. But before, he said that he couldn't sense the existence of the three realms' lotus soul. Could it be that there's something wrong with the scholar's perception? Mr. Ren said with a smile. They are clearly in the array, and it seems that they're still worried about getting out of the array. Go back and tell your young master that he can go to the doctor of Windmill Village to have a look. That doctor is a peerless divine doctor. Sure, Hua was speechless. However, he also saw with his own eyes that Sumo and Yiwu Hue were indeed sitting on the magic boat in the big array. Don't talk nonsense. At this time, the scholar's voice came from behind them. Oh, Mr. Ren turned around. Scholar, you actually came in person? There's a problem. The scholar frowned. I can be sure that they weren't in the big array before, because I just sensed that they appeared in the big array. So, I came here to confirm it. In the past 3 days, the aura of the Lotus Soul only appeared for a moment and then disappeared. Oh, Mr. Ren was also stunned when he heard this. Chapter 791. Disappeared for 3 days. Whether it was the scholar or Mr. Ren, they both knew that it was definitely not a temporary disappearance, because the time of the scattered villages around White Mountain was different from the various worlds. One day in Fallen Mortal Town was 100 years in the various worlds. 3 days was 300 years. The three realms' Lotus Soul actually had the ability to disappear in the scholar's drawing array for 300 years. In other words, he hid for 300 years. That was somewhat unbelievable. Although he did not have the ability to leave the array, hiding for 300 years was shocking enough. Could it be that he has some secret technique? Mr. Ren looked at the scholar and said, There should be. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. The scholar nodded and said, This three realms Lotus Soul is definitely not simple. Otherwise, the people of Windmill Village would not ask me to help him become a venerable. It seems that I have to test him again. Let's see how he can hide in my great array. Even I can't detect him. My great array was made for him. If he understands everything in the array, how can he become a venerable? The scholar spread out one hand. An antique long brush was already in his hand. Forget it. Let me do it. Mr. Ren smiled. My heaven hook is swimming in the lake. It is more convenient. That's good. The scholar smiled. But be careful. Don't let him catch you. Otherwise, he would be going through a tribulation, and you would ruin it. If you destroy him, the people of Windmill Village will have to find me. Don't worry. Mr. Ren smiled and nodded. Then his wrist that was holding the fishing rod shook slightly. Whoosh, whoosh, the fishing rod shook slightly, and the fishing line rose slightly. A ray of white light suddenly lit up on the surface of the lake and directly swept towards the shattered star zone's drawing array. The brilliance of the sky came with a ray of light. Sumo's expression suddenly changed. With a thought, the demonic ship flew and barely dodged the brilliance. However, the white light actually spun around and once again headed for Sumo. At this moment, Sumo's heart moved, because he was somewhat familiar with the aura of the white light. Back then, he had been teleported by the immeasurable ship to 3 million years ago. He and Jin Ingbu's fleet had fallen into the interstellar sky trench. At that time, a white light had directly destroyed Jin Ingbu's flagship. The aura of this white light was exactly the same as the last time. It's the same thing. However, Sumo did not know what it was. Could it be that the great array of the broken stars field was also created by an interstellar chasm? What was the relationship between this white light and the formation? These thoughts flashed through Sumo's mind. At the same time, the demonic boat under his feet moved and dodged the white light again. However, even though Sumo was fast, the white light was faster. The demonic boat shuttled back and forth, white light crisscrossing. The maggots in one's bones were like a shadow, following the body. With another thought, Sumo directly took Yi Wuhui and the little white pig back into his body. In this way, he could better spread his arms and legs. Danger was everywhere. However, Sumo was wondering if she could use this white light to break the formation. However, Sumo dodged it 5 times in a row. Each time, it was within a hair's breadth. No matter how Sumo dodged, the white light was able to move freely within the formation. It did not touch the formation at all. Or perhaps, the white light could travel between the inside and outside of the formation. Crack. Boom. On the 6th time, the white light was even faster and more forceful. It directly swept the tail of the demonic boat. The demonic boat shook, and instantly, red flowers filled the sky. The demonic boat was a being of the Lianbo level. Ordinary attacks wouldn't be able to cause any damage to it. However, this time, Sumo discovered that there was a deep mark on the side of the boat. Even so, Sumo did not clearly see what the white light was. He only speculated that it might be a Dharma treasure. If this continued, if Sumo was not careful, he could die. Therefore, he did not dare to deal with the white light anymore. At that moment, he felt that the white light was coming for him. This was completely different from the last time. The demonic boat disappeared instantly. Whoosh! Sumo took a step forward. The position of that step was very strange. It seemed to be advancing, but it was actually retreating. In a daze, Sumo seemed to hear a surprised voice coming from the universe. However, there was no time for Sumo to think. He immediately used his mystical footwork. 1 step. The white light was still there. Sumo did not expect the white light to be so powerful. It could actually cross realms to track. However, Sumo did not have a way out. He could only continue to run. If he was hit by the white light, his soul would probably be destroyed. Fortunately, the white light would pause slightly every time it crossed a realm. Its speed was not as fast as Sumo. 2 steps. The white light was still there. 3 steps. 4 steps. 5 steps. 6 steps. 7 steps. Back then, Nine-Tailed Raccoon had tracked Sumo through 5 realms. This time, the white light chased Sumo through 9 realms. At the 10th step, Sumo finally got rid of the white light. Sumo's figure was like a spirit of time and space. It passed through 49 realms and landed in the cave abode of the soul storage altar. Whoosh, whoosh. The moment he landed in the cave, Sumo panted and fell to the ground. His forehead was covered in cold sweat, and his back was drenched in sweat. It should be said that this was Sumo's most exhausting escape. Back then, when Nine-Tailed Raccoon was chasing after him, he was not so nervous. When he faced the Peacock King, he was also much better. That white light gave Sumo great psychological pressure, because he did not know what kind of existence it was. The unknown often brought fear to people, and it also made people expend more effort. At this time, Sumo was like this. After a deep breath, Sumo finally calmed down. Sumo, are you okay? At this time, Yi Wuhui flew out of her sea of consciousness and asked with concern. I'm fine. Sumo shook her head gently. It's just that white light was too strange. If I was still in that big array, I'm afraid I couldn't hold on for long. Is that a Dharma spell or a magic treasure? Yi Wuhui asked. I can't tell. Sumo sighed. But let's take a short rest. I still have to go into that big array to take a look. The appearance of the white light means that the big array is definitely not simple. Yes. Yi Wuhui nodded. Observation lake. He disappeared. The fishing rod in Mr. Ren's hand trembled, and he retracted it. Just now, I actually tried my best to chase after him. But he got rid of the heaven hook. Amazing. He knows the lotus spell. The scholar saw everything clearly. And it's not an ordinary lotus spell. Do you know what that step technique is? Mr. Ren looked at the scholar and asked. I don't know. But the scholar frowned. I feel that it's a bit like the legendary heaven trampling. The scholar looked at Mr. Ren and wanted to say something, but stopped. Oh, Mr. Ren frowned. He knew what the scholar wanted to say, but he shook his head in the end. Impossible. If he knew that step technique, he would have already stepped over our few villages and climbed White Mountain, who is still wandering in the various worlds. The scholar laughed. That's true. After all, we don't know it. But where did he go? I don't know. Mr. Ren looked at the observation lake and shook his head gently. As powerful as he was with the heaven's eye, he didn't know where Sumo was at this moment. By the lake, the scholar and Mr. Ren looked at each other speechlessly. Miu's painting was even more confused. Chapter 792. Where did Sumo go? That was the only topic of conversation between the scholar and Mr. Ren for the entire morning at Guanshi Lake. Later on, Sumo returned and appeared in the array again. This time, Mr. Ren didn't release the heaven hook. However, they still couldn't figure out where Sumo came from. After a while, Butcher came to the lakeside. Similarly, he couldn't explain why Sumo didn't come out of the array but was able to hide herself. However, he had his eyes on the little white pig on Sumo's shoulder. That pig is not bad. Butcher muttered to himself a few times. Later on, the scholar and Mr. Ren were worried that Butcher would go out of the village and bring the pig back. Sigh. Don't worry, you too. Butcher saw the worry in the scholar and Mr. Ren's eyes. Teacher loves pigs, and he takes them in the right way. I won't cross the line to steal a pig. Butcher, that pig isn't a domestic pig, right? Didn't you say that pigs from the windmill lineage are all messed up? Raising a pig as a pet is a blasphemy to domestic pigs. The scholar imitated Butcher's behavior. Huh? Butcher tried to explain. That pig is different. The scholar and Mr. Ren looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. Because in terms of rearing pigs, Boss Windmill was the best in Luo Fan Town. However, Butcher refused to accept it. The dragon elephant soul-devouring beast was a strange breed, mainly because it was cute, so Butcher was tempted. However, as he said, he would never cross the line to steal a pig. The three of them looked at Guanshi Lake again. After a full hour, they only saw Sumo sitting cross-legged in the array, not moving at all. Scholar, has he started to understand the profoundness of your array? Mr. Ren asked. Not necessarily, the scholar said. However, he should have felt something unusual. One had to know that he hadn't cultivated within the grand formation for the past 3 days. Now that he was staying in the array, it meant that something was wrong. I'm ashamed to say this, but to a certain extent, he can come and go as he pleases in my painting array. Mr. Ren shook his head with a smile. Actually, he must not come out of the formation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have appeared in the formation so many times. Actually, you can go to the Windmill Village tomorrow. Ask them. Maybe the people from Windmill can give you an explanation. And the scholar nodded. This idea isn't bad. I'll go to the Windmill to meet that scholar again, and then we'll have another bet. What do you guys say? Upon hearing that the scholar wanted to gamble, Mr. Ren and Butcher's expressions changed drastically. Scholar, if we're talking about poetry, singing, and dancing, that Windmill scholar might not be a match for you. However, in terms of gambling skills, you're no match for him. Forget about our village. Even in the entire Luo Fan Town, have you heard of anyone who want to bet against him? Butcher said. Scholar Du's gambling skills are invincible. Mr. Ren smiled. Scholar, you guys have gambled several times for the name Scholar. Which time didn't you lose? When you leave our village, don't forget your name. Fake Scholar. It doesn't matter. The fake scholar is Scholar Jia, the scholar said with a smile. To begin with, my surname is Jia. What does it matter? Poor scholar, stingy scholar, fake scholar. Butcher counted with his fingers. We're afraid of calling you wrong, so we can only call you scholar now. What I'm afraid of is that Scholar Do's next bet is for you to replace the word scholar with the word scholar. If you don't have a name, you'll be in trouble. It's impossible for me to be in trouble, the scholar said confidently. It's even more impossible for me to lose the word scholar. Oh, Mr. Wren and Butcher were stunned, then said in unison, You have a way to deal with Scholar Do. Yes, the scholar said. What way? Butcher asked. Hee. The scholar opened the folding fan in his hand, then pretended to sneer. If I don't use the word scholar as a bet, how can I be in trouble? Mr. Wren. Butcher. Muse, let's go. The scholar put on a noble look again. The one fishing, pay more attention to the painting array. If there's anything wrong with the Three Realms Lotus Soul, tell me. Tomorrow, I'll go to the windmill. Muse held back her laughter, bowed to Mr. Wren and Butcher, then followed the scholar's footsteps. If he goes to the windmill to gamble, he'll definitely lose again. Butcher sighed. Hee. Mr. Wren looked at the scholar's back and said meaningfully, Actually, losing isn't necessarily a pleasure. I forgot to mention just now. Actually, he can go to the Galaxy Village in the north to take a look. The people there will definitely understand the Three Realms Lotus Soul better. But it's a forbidden village, Butcher said. Hee. Mr. Wren sneered. Forbidden village or not, it's relative. If the scholar wants to go, there must be a way. After all, he has the divine brush in his hand. When Butcher heard this, the corners of his mouth curled up, and he slowly nodded. However, he definitely did not dare to go to the Galaxy Village. It was said that there were many lunatics living in the Galaxy Village. Broken Star Zone, inside the array. In the blink of an eye, it had been 30 years since the last time he met the white light. Back then, when the white light chased after him, Sumo returned to the Soul Storage Altar Cave abode. However, he only rested for 7 days before returning to the array. The white light was long gone and never appeared again. Sumo would rather believe that it was a coincidence. Otherwise, it would not be a good thing to be targeted by that white light. Therefore, Sumo enlarged the demonic boat, turning it into a black ark that was dozens of feet long and wide, and then set up an enchantment. Yi Woohoo and the little white pig both appeared on the demonic boat. They were all very happy to move, while the black feather deity preferred to sleep in the cosmos sack. Day and night, Sumo cultivated on the demonic boat, and at the same time, he was observing the array. In the first 3 years of cultivation, Sumo did not find anything unusual. However, gradually, Sumo felt that the spiritual energy in the array was not inferior to the Soul Storage Altar Cave abode at all. However, the spiritual energy in the Soul Storage Altar Cave abode was extremely uniform. However, the place with the densest spiritual energy in the array was always the area where he was. There seemed to be a spiritual energy array, I hear. If he moved, the spiritual energy array, I would move with him. The entire array seemed to move in response to Sumo's movements. Sumo, this array is so strange. Yi Woohoo also discovered the abnormality. That's right. Sumo frowned and looked around. In fact, he could not see the so-called array at all. However, he could feel everything. The person who set up the array gathered countless spiritual energy through this array. This array has the same effect as the Soul Storage Altar Cave abode. However, this array seems to be operating completely for you. Yi Woohoo looked at the slightly distorted space around Sumo. The spiritual energy around you is far superior to other places. This great array formation seems to be drawing in vast universe's spiritual energy for you to use. Chapter 793. The Eye of the Spiritual Energy Array. Sumo had indeed felt it. The place where he had been sitting for the past 30 years was surrounded by spiritual energy. It was as if he was cultivating on a spiritual energy fountain with endless spiritual energy. Is this the secret of the array? Sumo frowned. The person who set up this array wants me to cultivate with it. Most likely, Yi Woohoo said with a smile. This can explain why we are trapped in the formation and can't get out. Hee hee. Sumo smiled cautiously. I hope so. At this time, Mr. Rin and Butcher were still looking at Sumo. Fishing, the three-realm lotus soul, seems to have seen some clues. He is already cultivating with the help of the array. In this way, he will be able to become a venerable in less than 10,000 years. Butcher said, more or less. Mr. Rin nodded, but in the end, it still depends on the lotus soul's understanding of the array. You have to know that the array is not as simple as assisting in cultivation. Everything depends on his luck. Butcher nodded. 10,000 years. If Sumo were to hear this, he would probably spit out blood. In fact, to reach the venerable realm from the 7th level of rebirth realm in 10,000 years was something that countless rebirth realm cultivators did not even dare to dream of. However, it was indeed a bit long for Sumo, because if he wanted the immortal bathing ancient lotus to mature, he had to become a venerable within 1,000 years. Otherwise, the lotus would be meaningless. Time flew, and another 100 years passed in the blink of an eye. On the demonic boat, Sumo finally broke through again. The 8th level of Eternal Realm. There were only 1,000 years left before the immortal bathing ancient lotus had to mature. In fact, it was 1,000 years, and the few odd years were negligible. Sumo opened his eyes again. In this array, he only broke through the 8th level of Rebirth Realm after 130 years. This speed was not fast for Sumo, and was even a bit slow. After all, when he was sitting in the array, he was already at the 7th level of Rebirth Realm. There were still 2 mountains in front of Sumo that needed to be crossed. 9 levels of Rebirth Realm, and the peak of Rebirth Realm. Sumo was once a venerable one, so he knew very well how difficult it was to cross these 2 mountains. This was especially so for the peak of the Rebirth Realm. It seemed like it was only a step away from the Venerable Realm. However, that one line was a world of difference. There was a qualitative difference between the Rebirth Realm and the Rebirth Realm. All those years ago, the legendary prodigy of the 3 realms, Bu Miaotian, had spent an immeasurable amount of time to cross that line. From this, one could see how tall the mountain was and how difficult it was to climb it. Phew! Sumo exhaled heavily. 8 levels of rebirth. Yi Wuhui asked. And Sumo nodded. It must be very difficult to reach the peak of the 9 levels of rebirth. Yi Wuhui said. There are still 1,000 years. Sumo smiled faintly. I will do my best. Haste makes waste. Yi Wuhui smiled sweetly at Sumo. Sumo, it's all right if you can't let the immortal bathing ancient lotus ripen. Actually, I'm already used to being a soul. It's best if I can become a venerable within 1,000 years. But if I can't, then don't force it. As long as my realm increases, it doesn't matter if it's earlier or later. There must be another way with my immortal body. Hee hee. Sumo nodded and smiled. Don't worry, I will weigh the pros and cons. If I can't let the immortal bathing ancient lotus ripen this time, I will definitely help you forge an immortal body in the future. Without an immortal body, I will stay in your sea of consciousness and not leave. Yi Wuhui smiled. You have to protect me. No problem. Sumo nodded. Oh, hee hee. Yi Wuhui was stunned at first, but then he smiled and nodded. However, he understood that Sumo nodded so confidently because she had great confidence in becoming a venerable within 1,000 years. Pills can't be used anymore, right? Yi Wuhui asked. Yes. Sumo smiled. The Ascension pill is already a top-notch pill. Above the 7th level of rebirth, there are basically no more pills that can be used. It is impossible to become a venerable by relying on pills. Then, what are the conditions to become a venerable? Yi Wuhui asked. Back then, although she had accompanied Bu Miaotian to travel around Tibet, she didn't know much about becoming a venerable. After all, she was still thousands of miles away from becoming a venerable. Become a venerable? Sumo narrowed her eyes when she heard Yi Wuhui's question. He looked at the vast starry sky, and his thoughts were boundless. Because he was born to be a venerable, he had experienced many tribulations in the 3 realms. However, every time he became a venerable, it could only be considered a kind of awakening. Therefore, most of the time, Sumo really didn't think about what was needed to become a venerable. He wasn't an ordinary cultivator. Therefore, Sumo finally smiled and said, "Actually, I really don't know what is needed to become a venerable. Of course, cultivation is a must. However, becoming a venerable is a wonderful process. Becoming a venerable is not just a kind of power, but a kind of enlightenment, a kind of state of mind, a kind of perfection." Sumo said thoughtfully, "I'm more willing to understand that becoming a venerable is a process that can only be encountered and not sought. Let nature take its course, and success will follow naturally. Let nature take its course, and success will follow naturally." Yi Wuhui pondered over these words and smiled knowingly. "Sumo, you know this. Then all the more you don't have to be anxious." Oh, Sumo then understood that Yi Wuhui was still trying to persuade her. She couldn't help but smile and say, "Don't worry, I will definitely be fine." Yi Wuhui nodded. Then, Sumo closed her eyes again. The entire array was still in operation. Sumo was still surrounded by countless spiritual forces. Yi Wuhui looked at Sumo, who was cultivating, with complicated feelings. "Once this man becomes a venerable, he will most likely leave me, right?" Yi Wuhui smiled sadly. Although after Sumo becomes a venerable, she would refine an ancient lotus to make it into her immortal body, but compared to having an immortal body, she was more willing to stay by Sumo's side. As he thought about it, Yi Wuhui actually fell asleep on the demonic boat. Sumo went into meditation, and the demonic boat was silent. Little White Pig was also lying beside Yi Wuhui, snoring loudly. In the blink of an eye, another 200 years passed. In these 200 years, everything was stable. If one looked at it from the outside, it seemed that nothing had changed. Beside the goddess lake, Mr. N was fishing. The scholar was here again. However, when he looked at Sumo, who was cultivating, he couldn't help but shake his head. He still hasn't understood my array despite cultivating like this. Mr. N laughed. "It seems that until the end, he won't be able to understand your good intentions. Scholar, why don't you make a trip to the windmill the other day?" Cough, cough. The scholar coughed lightly. The windmill cultivators also don't know what secret technique the three realms lotus soul has to hide in the array. In the wind wheel's tribulation, that lotus soul is their little junior brother. All right, his name is Sumo. Oh, little junior brother? Mr. N paused. Since it's little junior brother, didn't Bai Yifeng teach him the method to break the array? Why can't he come out of the array? Oh, the scholar was dissatisfied. Angler, from what you said, that Bai Yifeng's array attainments are definitely above mine. Her little junior brother can break through my formation? Of course. Young Master N chuckled. Her attainments in array formations are definitely above yours. It's just that she can't set up the array as freely as you can. The scholar sneered. Angler, you're valuing a lover over a friend. That Miss Bai is of course good in your eyes. A touch of gentleness flashed past Mr. Ren's eyes. She's indeed good in everything. Unfortunately, the falling flowers yearn for love, but the heartless water flows on. Mr. Ren heaved a long sigh. The scholar took a look at Mr. Ren and didn't mention Bai Yifeng again. Sumo is good at windmill cultivation, but his realm is not high enough, so he can't come out of the array. But Scholar Du said that his little junior brother will definitely be able to come out of the array, and it won't take too long. Otherwise, he's willing to lose to me once. Mr. Ren nodded and changed the topic. Scholar, you've lost the bet again. The scholar said awkwardly. In future, please call me Little Scholar. Chapter 794. There were still 800 years before the immortal bathing ancient lotus had to mature. Sumo opened his eyes again on the demonic boat. He was still at the 8th level of the eternal realm, and there was still a long way to go before he reached the perfected level. Although the spiritual energy in the formation was abundant, Sumo's cultivation seemed to have reached a bottleneck. There were many bottlenecks on the path of cultivation. However, Sumo had never encountered one before. This time, his bottleneck came at a bad time. His absorption of spiritual energy seemed to have slowed down. Sumo stood up and looked at the formation. At this time, Yi Wuhui and the little white pig were sleeping soundly. Companionship was the longest confession of love. Sumo understood the meaning of Yi Wuhui's companionship. It was definitely not for a celestial body. However, Sumo could only give her a celestial body. Therefore, Sumo had to become a venerable one in the remaining 800 years. Whoosh, Sumo's figure moved, and he was already out of the demonic boat's boundary. This was the first time he walked out of the demonic boat's boundary after cultivating in the formation for more than 300 years. Sumo walked in the direction of the Pure Land starfield. He wanted to try and see if he could walk out of the formation now. However, the result disappointed him, because he had inexplicably returned to the side of the demonic boat's boundary after walking for a short while. Sumo sighed in his heart. However, his heart suddenly skipped a beat, because he suddenly realized that the time he took to return seemed to have shortened. It was not like this before. So, Sumo walked in another direction. Soon, Sumo returned to the same place. The time he used was almost the same as before. Now, the demonic boat was the center of the formation, and the formation had become smaller. This discovery shook Sumo to his core, because this was the first time he felt a change in the formation after being trapped in the formation for more than 600 years. And this change should have happened in the 300 years he cultivated in the formation. That meant that his cultivation had caused the formation to change. Sumo stood in the middle of the array and narrowed her eyes. It seemed that not only could this great array draw in the power of vast universe, but it was also a condensed form of strength. In other words, the spiritual energy that Sumo absorbed actually came from two sources, vast universe and the array itself. An idea flashed through Sumo's mind. In that case, breaking the formation meant digesting the entire formation. Sumo's heart was suddenly enlightened. He finally understood this array. It wasn't trying to trap Sumo. There were two purposes for its existence. One was to capture vast universe's spiritual energy, and the other was to allow Sumo to swallow itself. This was all to help Sumo in her cultivation. Unfortunately, before this, Sumo did not realize. He had always been relying on the spiritual chi of the formation to cultivate, but he had never had any ideas about the formation itself. Previously, he had only been thinking about how to get out of the array. However, none of the methods and secret techniques he was familiar with could achieve this. Now, he understood that he could only leave the great devouring formation. However, how could it be easy to devour the formation? In fact, Sumo knew countless spells. However, he had to choose the most suitable method for the devouring formation. He wanted to maintain a balance. Not only did he have to maintain the great array formation's ability to gather the vast universe's spiritual energy, but he also had to slowly swallow it up. Sumo frowned for a long time before revealing a smile. Then, Sumo returned to the demonic ark and sat cross-legged in the middle. Her hands began to draw in the air. Seal. However, this time, Sumo did not deduce the reincarnation of time and space. Instead, he deduced a forbidden diagram on the east, south, west, and north sides of the demonic boat. Wood, fire, metal, and water forbidden diagrams, while the earth forbidden diagram was set up on the demonic boat. 5 elements forbidden diagram. Actually, this was the most basic change for a forbidden painting technique. As soon as the 5 elements forbidden diagram was formed, it resonated. A mysterious light immediately connected them, and they started deducing continuously. Sumo was going to set up a formation with the forbidden painting. Observation Lake. Scholar, what do you think? At this moment, the scholar hadn't left yet. Young Master Run reminded him. That is, the scholar frowned. A forbidden painting technique. Yes, Mr. Rin said. It looks like it. You should know that the so-called forbidden painting is a secret technique unique to the 3 realms. Other than the 3 realms galaxy, the other worlds only have seals, not forbidden paintings. These seals are somewhat similar to the diagrams outside the galaxy village, the scholar said. Hee hee. Speaking of the galaxy village, I even told Butcher that you should go there to take a look. After all, that sumo came from the Galaxy Village. If you can go there and ask around, you will definitely gain a lot, Mr. Rin said with a smile. Go to the Galaxy Village? The scholar immediately shook his head. I don't dare to go there. The Galaxy Village is known as the #1 forbidden village in Luofan Town. If I go there for no reason, wouldn't I be courting death? What do you mean courting death? Mr. Run asked with a smile. It has Phalian on the outside and forbidden paintings on the inside. I can't go in or out, but you wanted to go in? The scholar smiled bitterly. Why don't you let me go to Izong Glaze World to save the sealed Three Realms Lotus Soul? Hee hee. You won't be able to save that sealed Lotus Soul. Moreover, it's not your turn to save it. Mr. Rin laughed. But I know that you can still enter the Galaxy Village. The scholar shook his head. Forget it. I still want to live the life of a mortal. I don't want to participate in the War of the Realms. This time, if not for Windmill's request, I wouldn't want to meddle in this matter. I only wish for that sumo to break the array as soon as possible and become a venerable. I will be considered a merit point. Mr. Rin listened to the scholar's words and smiled. Scholar, Mr. Rin stopped smiling and said with a heavy tone, if the heavens really change, can our East Fence village stay out of it? Oh, hearing Mr. Rin's tone, the scholar was slightly startled and sighed. Mr. Rin, when a nest is overturned, how can the eggs remain intact? Mr. Rin nodded and smiled helplessly. Scholar, actually you and I both understand. We're just here to steal a few days of leisure. The scholar regained his composure and smiled. As a fisherman, 1 day of stealing is 1 day of leisure. Drinking wine in the East Fence village, we enjoy the pleasures of the mortal world. When the heavens change, we'll talk about it again. You're right. Mr. Rin also smiled. Oh. At the same time, Mr. Rin looked at the lake. At this time, Sumo's forbidden map was no longer just the 5 elements map. On the demonic boat, there was a round wheel. Sumo sat on it. Half of the round wheel was black and the other half was white. There were a total of 9 scales on it, faintly emitting light. At the same time, on the 4 directions of the demonic boat, there was a similar wheel. However, they were slightly smaller. Wheel array, that's the 3-realm roulette. The scholar's lips curled into a smile. It looks like Suemo has seen through my array. Could it be that he wants to dissolve my formation by using the 3 realms roulette? Most likely. It seems that he has been taught by Yifeng. Otherwise, he wouldn't have set up an array in an array. Using an array to fuse with an array is a supreme technique, Mr. Rin said. The 3 realms Lotus Soul is indeed extraordinary. In this way, he will definitely become a supremacy in 3,000 years. The scholar nodded. In the Remnant Star Zone, inside the array. Sumo's array was an innovation. The 3 realms forbidden map and the wind wheel array. Whoosh! When he looked again, waves suddenly rose on all 4 sides of the demonic ship. Thousands of spiritual forces were like tides. They glowed with 5-colored light and hovered above Sumo's head. Spirit open. Heaven devouring. Sumo conjured a seal. He had to break through his bottleneck. At this time, he set off huge waves in his core sea. At the same time, a wheel appeared on top of his head. The surging spiritual power was filtered by the wheel and began to pour directly into Sumo's core sea. Chapter 795. If Sumo was cultivating in the spiritual spring before, then he was cultivating in the spiritual sea now. There was a spiritual sea inside, a spiritual sea outside, and a roulette above and below. Sumo was sitting cross-legged on the demonic boat. At this moment, he had returned to his beautiful appearance in white, because he had completely opened all the restraints. His white clothes were like snow, and his long hair was flying in the wind. 5-colored spiritual light, and the illusory sea floated. At that moment, it was as if all the power of the entire vast universe was pouring into Sumo. He was like a lotus. Whoosh, whoosh. There was even the sound of tides coming from all sides of the demonic boat. On the demonic boat, Yi Wu-Hui finally woke up. The little white pig was also looking around blankly. What's going on? Yi Wu-Hui couldn't help but look at the little white pig and ask. At this moment, She felt that she was in the sea of spiritual power, and the barrier of the demonic boat was like a five-colored crystal ball in the depths of the sea. Oomph. The little white pig shook his head in a daze. He didn't know anything. Just like Yi Wu Hui, he slept, and then he became what he was now. Fortunately, Sumo was as steady as a mountain, and his expression was calm. The roulette above his head and under his seat were constantly spinning. That made Yi Wu Hui feel a little more at ease. It seemed that Sumo seemed to have found the true use of this array. At this moment, she looked into the distance and could no longer see the so-called broken star zone. The entire array had undergone a qualitative change. Yi Wu Hui didn't know how Sumo did it, but she saw the many forbidden maps around her. The forbidden maps were an array. They must have been set up by Sumo. It seems that Sumo has a chance to become a venerable one. Yi Wu Hui sighed softly, and his expression was a little complicated. Unfortunately, the little white pig didn't understand what she was thinking. Wasn't it good for his master to become a venerable one? So, Yi Wu Hui also began to sit cross-legged. She didn't want to improve her cultivation, but to stabilize her mind. The little white pig began to sleep soundly next to her. Time flies, not caring about the years. In the blink of an eye, 500 years had passed. Other than the flowing light array, everything else seemed to be still. Sumo was cultivating, Yi Wu Hui was meditating, and the little white pig was sleeping soundly. At this moment, if someone were to see this scene, they would definitely find it interesting. At the lakeside, Mr. Rin had a faint smile on his face while the scholar was a little shocked. It was only 5 days. Scholar was just passing by and decided to take a look. However, he did not expect Sumo to have already broken through the 9-stage rebirth realm and was approaching the peak of the rebirth realm. The lotus soul of the 3 realms is a monster of the myriad worlds. The scholar didn't dare to believe it. If that's the case, he might become a paragon tomorrow. My mission is considered complete. Mr. Rin nodded in agreement. Whether it was AMU or Sumo, both of them were indeed existences that shocked the worlds. There were many worlds, many lotus souls, and there were also the outstanding ones. Now, the scholar's array had shrunk to a radius of only a few hundred feet. From the perspective of the scholar and Mr. Rin, it really looked like a 5-colored crystal ball. In the blink of an eye, another 100 years passed. The demonic boat had shrunk to a radius of a few hundred feet. The entire array was also only a radius of 500 feet. Sumo was still cultivating and did not move. The peak of the 9-stage rebirth realm. At this moment, Sumo's body was rippling with endless divine light. Between the wheels, he was like a god. Yi Wu Hui slowly opened her eyes. She did not meditate, but just closed her eyes to rest. However, at this moment, she felt that Sumo seemed to be acting strangely, so she instinctively opened her eyes. Yi Wu Hui looked at Sumo. Sumo's white clothes seemed to be whiter. Sumo's long hair seemed to be longer. More importantly, she felt that Sumo's temperament had changed. It was different from the previous Sumo. At this moment, Yi Wu Hui could not see Sumo's realm at all. She only felt that Sumo was like a tall mountain that she had to look up to. She had once felt this kind of feeling from her patriarch, Bumiao Yin. Was Sumo going to become a venerable? Yi Wu Hui bit her lower lip. Around the demonic boat, tides surged. Suddenly, the entire demonic boat shook. Yi Wu Hui's expression changed, and the little white pig also woke up. Looking again, the 5-colored light array outside the demonic boat suddenly shrunk. There were a total of 6 wheels in the entire space. They all began to spin rapidly and crazily, which was completely different from the situation before. An extremely strong sense of oppression whizzed over. Whoosh! The demonic boat shrunk again and was now less than a radius of 5 feet. If they were surrounded by an ocean before, they were now facing a tsunami. The demonic boat shook and undulated, like a small boat in a vast universe. Yi Wu Hui and the little white pig could no longer stand on the demonic boat. The demonic boat's barrier seemed to be unable to stop the whistling spirit energy. The 4 roulette wheels on the outside were all moving towards the center. The barrier was about to break. At this moment, It was impossible for Yi Wuhui to return to Sumo's sea of consciousness. The space around Sumo was completely surrounded by spirit energy. The time and space there seemed to be changing. Sumo had become a blurry shadow in Yi Wuhui's eyes. Yi Wuhui could not explain the current situation, because it was completely beyond her understanding. Fear appeared in the little white pig's eyes. Yi Wuhui flew straight toward the little white pig. She still wanted to save the little white pig. However, the little white pig's body shook. Whoosh! In an instant, it transformed into the original form of the Dracophant's soul-devouring beast. Its fangs were like spears, and its back was like a mountain. The Dracophant's soul-devouring beast's body almost filled the entire barrier. Black gas surged under its feet. At the same time, it spread its wings to protect Yi Wuhui. One had to know that Yi Wuhui was an extremely fragile soul. The current Dracophant soul-devouring beast was comparable to the rebirth state, and its physical body was extremely strong. Therefore, it had no problem temporarily protecting Yi Wuhui. Roar! The Dracophant soul-devouring beast roared at the sky at Sumo. However, the current Sumo could no longer hear anything outside, because it had reached the most crucial moment of breaking through to the supremacy state. Sumo wanted to swallow the entire formation. The formation was also absorbing the power of Haoyu for Sumo. That was why the current situation was happening. If not for the demonic boat, even the Dracophant soul-devouring beast would be crushed by such power. Buzz, buzz, the demonic boat shook. If it was not a Lianbo-level existence, it would have been crushed by now. The Dracophant soul-devouring beast protected Yi Wuhui and tried to stay as far away from Sumo as possible. However, the space was limited, and they could only stay 3 to 4 feet away from Sumo. Boom! Crack! All of a sudden, a corner of the barrier shattered. The wheel on the east side had already flown straight towards Sumo, and then directly melted into the wheel beneath Sumo. All of this was just the beginning. With a loud bang, the enchantment completely shattered, and the remaining 3 roulettes flew in. The Dracophant soul-devouring beast was almost sucked into the whirlpool of power with Yi Wuhui. Roar! At that moment, the Dracophant soul-devouring beast had no other choice. It grabbed Yi Wuhui with its front claws, and then suddenly charged in a strange direction. One had to know that Sumo's footwork was its inheritance. Boom! The Dracophant soul-devouring beast had already gone to another world. The moment it disappeared, the entire formation completely collapsed. The wheel above Sumo's head and beneath her shone brightly, and then suddenly merged into one. Venerated transformation. Sumo's shout echoed throughout the entire star field. Chapter 796. If someone looked at the vast universe, they would find that a black hole had appeared between the Pure Land and the Dead Souls star field. It was a true black hole. The scattered stars, star zone no longer existed. All the stars and dust within a radius of millions of miles had been swallowed by the black hole. Even light could not pass through the black hole. However, at this moment, a beautiful cultivator in white was sitting cross-legged in the black hole. Black hole, white dress. The scene looked extremely strange, but it really happened. Sumo was like a Buddha embedded in the black hole. Her white dress fluttered, her long hair fluttered, and she was as beautiful as a demon. Following the shout of venerable transformation, Sumo's body suddenly shot out a light that made the black hole tremble. The dazzling white light directly annihilated the black hole. Suddenly, Sumo opened her eyes. Light shot out in all directions, like a burning star. 2 rays of divine light surrounded the vast universe. The black hole instantly shattered. In an entire void, there seemed to be only Sumo. This part of the world belonged to her. Venerable. Even in a hidden world, a venerable was a top existence. Dead Soul Star Field. Wang Yu had just swallowed the dead spirit energy of a star and let out a long breath. Peak Rebirth Realm. She had finally achieved her goal. However, at this moment, she suddenly felt the aura of a venerable. That aura came from the direction of the Pure Land star field. That was the aura of a venerable, released in an instant. Usually, such an aura would only appear when one became a venerable. Someone became a venerable? Wang Yu raised her eyebrows. Someone became a venerable in the Pure Land Star field? Wang Yu did not dare to believe it and wanted to investigate. However, just as she thought about it, the aura of a venerable disappeared. Wang Yu could not help but be startled. That meant that the venerable instantly disappeared from the world she was in. So powerful, Wang Yu muttered to herself. At the same time, she was somewhat puzzled. Under normal circumstances, a venerable would not leave immediately. However, she did not expect that person to be Sumo. After all, in less than 1,000 years, even if Sumo was an awakened, it was not very likely for her to become a venerable one. At this time, Sumo had already put away the magic boat and left the Broken Star Zone. Sumo became a venerable one, but he discovered that everything around him had changed. The magic boat was still there, but the little white pig and Yi Wu Hui were gone. Sumo's first thought was that they had returned to the soul storage altar. Since the little white pig would definitely be able to bring Yi Wu Hui back, Sumo headed straight for the soul storage altar. The Exalt realm was a realm Sumo was very familiar with. Therefore, Sumo didn't feel uncomfortable at all. However, he was stronger. When he used that mysterious footwork, he was even more skillful and at ease. In just a few moments, he had returned to the soul storage altar. This speed was far faster than before. In the front of the cave, Sumo appeared. Sumo, Yi Wu Hui and the little white pig pounced on her. The human and the pig had actually just returned to the soul storage altar not long ago. Sumo was just one step behind them. As expected, you came back first. Sumo smiled. Yi Wu Hui controlled his emotions, then deliberately said with a straight face, "This time, it's all thanks to Humph. If it didn't bring me back, I probably wouldn't have been able to come back. This time, I didn't think it through." Sumo was a little embarrassed. "But, Humph, you did well this time," Sumo said to the little white pig, then moved to the back of the cave. With another wave of her hand, she directly picked a pile of immortal fruits. "Humph." The little white pig cheered and ate happily. "Sumo, you became a venerable one?" Yi Wu Hui followed to the back of the cave and asked softly. Sumo smiled. "Everything is just right. The immortal bathing ancient lotus should wither in a few years. My reincarnation soul chi is ready." Yi Wu Hui forced a smile and nodded. At this time, Sumo had already walked in front of the immortal bathing ancient lotus. Then, Sumo stretched out the middle and index fingers of her right hand, and a green light directly poured into the immortal bathing ancient lotus. That was the reincarnation soul chi that Sumo left behind after her advancement. Mortal chi, immortal chi, and reincarnation chi. The three soul chi were gathered. Whoosh, whoosh. Looking again, the pond water rippled slightly, and the immortal bathing ancient lotus swayed gently. In an instant, the white lotus completely bloomed, and the seed pod inside grew even faster. The seed pod gave birth to a child. Of course, the immortal bathing ancient lotus would continue to grow. Right now, Sumo only needed that lotus. The falling petals were already in Sumo's hand. There were a total of 9 lotus petals. Li Beihan had said clearly that one of them could be used to refine Yi Wu Hui's body. Now that Sumo had 9 lotus petals in her hand, it was enough. Sumo patted her bag of holding. Whoosh! The ghostly figure appeared again. This ghostly figure could actually be used by Yi Wu Hui to attach his soul to it. But after attaching his soul, he would be like a mortal without any magic power. But with it, he could save a lot of trouble. "Miss Yi, I will first merge the lotus petals into this puppet. Then, you can merge your soul into it. Everything should be ready," Sumo said. Yi Wu Hui smiled faintly. "All right." Looking again, Sumo patted her bag of holding again. She actually took out the soul depository altar first. Then, he threw a lotus petal into the cauldron. At the same time, Sumo's hands quickly formed a seal. That seal was a nether art. In reality, forging a physical body was not difficult for Sumo. It was just that what Yi Wuhui's body needed was special. He took out the soul depository cauldron in hopes that it could strengthen his physical body like a finished pill. If it could not, it would not have any effect. Looking again, following Sumo's seal, the lotus petal instantly changed. It directly turned into the figure of a woman, white and faintly drifting. At the same time, it gave off a strange light and a faint lotus fragrance. At this time, the soul depository cauldron did not move. Whoosh! Looking again, Sumo pointed at the ghostly figure. The lotus woman and the ghostly figure slowly merged together under Sumo's magic power. The ghostly figure was originally very similar to Yi Wuhui's main body. Now that it had merged with the lotus woman, it instantly became full of spiritual energy. However, she was still wearing a purple robe. Her eyes were closed as if she was asleep. At this time, from the outside, she was no different from a real person. Buzz! Buzz! At this time, the soul depository cauldron finally made a strange sound. However, this time, it did not sway left and right. Instead, it released a faint layer of white mist that wrapped around the ghostly figure's physical body. Then, the white mist gradually seeped into the ghostly figure's physical body. Oh! Seeing this, Sumo's lips curled. Because the soul depository cauldron had indeed increased the quality of the physical body. He could feel that the physical body was continuously being refined and improved. After a full hour, the white mist gradually thinned. However, he did not expect the purple robe to melt. In the air, there was a naked female body. Skin like snow, long hair like a waterfall, curves exquisite and soul-stirring. This scene greatly exceeded Sumo's expectations. Sumo could not help but lower her head. Next to her, Yi Wuhui's face was even redder. For a moment, he did not know what to do. The little white pig was stunned and then covered his eyes with his hoof. Miss Yi, you can merge with the physical body now. Sumo said, Oh, okay. Yi Wuhui was a little flustered. Then with a thought, she directly entered the physical body. In fact, the final fusion was a matter of course. There was no problem at all. A blue dress was now on Yi Wuhui's body. After 3,000 years, Yi Wuhui finally had a physical body again. She was a real person now. This was because she had already merged with the 3-inch puppet. She was no longer a god's puppet. Sumo, look up. Yi Wuhui's voice was gentle and shy. Looking at her again, her temperament was out of this world. Yi Wuhui's blue dress fluttered. She was slim and graceful. With one hand gently stroking her hair, she smiled sweetly at Sumo, just like when they first met. Chapter 797. Her blue dress fluttered, and the fragrance of lotus permeated the air. Level 3 Rebirth Realm. This time, after fusing with the Rebirth Immortal Body, Yi Wuhui directly reached Level 3 Rebirth Realm. One had to know that she was previously a one-life immortal completion stage, even though she was a god's puppet and could avoid the 5 declines. Advancing to Level 3 Rebirth Realm was something that could only be encountered by chance. Yi Wuhui felt extremely wonderful. Her smile and frown had its own charm. Sumo raised her head and nodded with a smile. The promise of 3,000 years had finally come to fruition. Yi Wuhui had a real body. The little white pig leaped into Yi Wuhui's embrace to celebrate. Yi Wuhui hugged the little white pig and smiled slyly at Sumo. How is it? Do I look different from before? Your appearance and temperament are better than before, Sumo said. I like hearing that. Yi Wuhui nodded and waved his hand. A water mirror appeared in front of her, and she looked at herself in the mirror. Naturally, she was very satisfied with herself. She was a real woman now. This was actually very important to Yi Wuhui. She did not want Sumo to see only his soul every day. At this time, Sumo had already entered the flower bed and walked to the bottom of the black cliff. Half squatting, he formed a seal with his hands. Nether art, spirit summoning, Sumo shouted softly. Looking again, his fingertips emitted endless nether chi and directly poured into the small netherworld. Originally, the netherworld was only 3 feet wide. Now, it instantly expanded to 7 feet, more than double its original size. Within the netherworld, black light crisscrossed. Looking at the red spider lily, it began to grow rapidly. Originally, it was only a few inches of seedlings, but they instantly grew taller and began to intertwine with each other. The 7 sprouts merged into one. The spider lilies were like vines that climbed up the black cliff. At the same time, 7 flower buds began to form, with only a slight difference in size between them. Their opening was just around the corner. Sumo's ascension gave this small netherworld a great deal of power. It could be said that the netherworld was rapidly evolving. At the same time, the red spider lily began its second stage of growth. Sumo walked out of the garden. How long before they open? Yi Wu Hui asked. It's hard to say. Sumo shook her head and said, it could be at least a few thousand years, or at most tens of thousands of years. When they bloom, can they transform into white-clothed meditation cultivators? Yi Wu Hui asked again. Yes. Sumo said, however, they need my technique to awaken them. Otherwise, they will only be equinox flowers. 7 flowers blooming at the same time? The difference between them is less than 2 hours. Sumo couldn't help but smile. The 7 of them are all very interesting existences. Yes. Yi Wu Hui nodded. Then, she thought for a moment and said, Sumo, what are you planning to do next? I want to go to Divine Peacock Mountain. Sumo said. Sumo. Yi Wu Hui bit her lower lip and said, then, can I go with you? This. Sumo hesitated. Divine Peacock Mountain is in the wisdom realm. My trip will be filled with danger, and you have just reforged your body. If anything happens, I'm afraid. I'm not afraid. Yi Wu Hui looked at Sumo and said, I will help you find Sister Wu Er. Once I find her, I will return to the Pure Land Star Field or find my ancestral master. At that moment, Yi Wu Hui was humble. Actually, she didn't really want to obtain anything, or rather, she didn't dare to think about obtaining anything. She simply wanted to stay by Sumo's side. Oomph! The little white pig rubbed her nose against Yi Wu Hui's arm and looked at Sumo pitifully. Her meaning was obvious. Sumo, I won't affect anything you do. When it's time to leave, I will leave. Yi Wu Hui said, moreover, since the wisdom realm is dangerous, I think you need a helper. I'm not a useless person, and I'm not a burden. Yi Wu Hui said. Ha! Sumo laughed. In fact, Yi Wu Hui's reasons were both reasons and not reasons. How could he not understand Yi Wu Hui's thoughts? How about this? Sumo looked at Yi Wu Hui and said, this time, you and I will go to Divine Peacock Mountain together. However, no matter what the final result is, the matter of Divine Peacock Mountain is over. You must return to Northern Chill City of the Pure Land Stellar region. Bu Xingkong and Yi Xingbai are both there. They will take care of you wholeheartedly. If you agree, then we will do this. If not, then I will go to Divine Peacock Mountain alone. You will cultivate in the soul storage altar. All right. Yi Wu Hui heard this and nodded. I agree. I will go with you to Divine Peacock Mountain. Haha. All right. Sumo smiled helplessly. Then it's a deal. Whoever goes back on his word is a puppy. Yi Wu Hui said with a smile. Sumo nodded, but did not continue the topic. She changed the topic. If we want to go to Divine Peacock Mountain, we need to make some preparations. Yes, that's right. Yi Wu Hui was in a good mood. Then what can I help you with? Of course there is something you can do. Sumo laughed. However, before that, we should first deal with the matter of the desolate demon shadow. He is already awakened. As she spoke, Sumo patted her storage pouch. Whoosh! A black shadow flew out of the cosmos bag and transformed into a human form. However, the shadow's face could not be seen clearly. It was just a shadow. In fact, it was the shadow of Famine's true form. Demon King. The shadow of Famine's tone was slightly surprised. Where's this? My cave. Sumo smiled. He did not explain much. Shadow, I have wronged you all these years. You have always been in my bag. Huh. The shadow of famine shook his head and sighed. Demon King, what are you saying? If you had not saved me that day, I would have been reduced to ashes long ago. I only want to know, what was the result of that battle? How much time has passed? During that battle, the Supreme Peacock King was subdued by a friend of mine and brought away. Sumo said, as for the time, if we really count it, that battle happened more than 3 million years ago. However, in reality, you have only been in my bag for about 1,000 years. Oh, the shadow of famine did not understand. Back then, I mistakenly boarded the immeasurable ship and arrived in the world 3 million years ago. Actually, I just want to know the truth. Sumo said, the immeasurable ship. The shadow of famine was shocked. However, he did not ask further, because he understood that there were many things that he did not need to ask. Another 3 million years. Huh. The demon shadow of desolation let out a long sigh. Life and death, time flies. I, the shadow of famine, am still just a shadow. Sumo laughed. Yaoing, there are actually 2 reasons why I let you out this time. Demon King, please speak. First, I can help you reforge your body. Sumo said. Oh, the shadow of famine did not show any excitement. Instead, he asked, what's the second thing? The second thing is that I want you to accompany me to the Sanskrit realm. Sumo's voice deepened. Because I want to go to Divine Peacock Mountain, to find someone and take revenge. Chapter 798. Find someone. Revenge. Sumo's tone was very heavy when she said these words. The Peacock clan had crossed paths with him time and time again, and they had long since formed an irreconcilable enmity. Therefore, Sumo's departure would definitely set off a bloody storm. When Yaoing heard this, he couldn't help but laugh heartily. Demon King, I like your second task. Oh, Sumo was surprised. How about the first one? Demon King. Yaoing shook her head and sighed. The Demon King saved my life. Back then, Xiao Huang and I made a life and death pact. Unfortunately, I still haven't been able to fulfill my promise. Although I, Yaoing, am just a shadow, I value favors and promises the most. I deeply regret this. Therefore, it is my duty to accompany the Demon King to the Divine Peacock Mountain in the Wisdom World. Naturally, I will not refuse. However, there's no need to reforge my body. Why? Sumo said, the body I forge for you will definitely fuse with your shadow. It definitely won't be like before, where you have to constantly possess them. Huang Ying laughed. I appreciate the Demon King's good intentions. It's just that after so many tens of thousands of years, I've actually obtained many physical bodies. To me, Xiao Huang's fleshly body is already perfect. However, I still experience the destruction of my physical body twice. Actually, every time my physical body dissipates, it's a life and death torture. Maybe I shouldn't have a physical body in the first place. After all, I'm only a shadow of the monster race. The demon shadow of famine let out a long sigh. So I don't want a mortal body. That way, I might be able to perform many of my techniques better. To me, my physical body might be a burden. Sumo didn't expect this at all. The demon shadow of famine was actually a bit disheartened at the thought of possessing a mortal body. Demon King, I can see that you have already become a supremacy. Then, if you don't mind, I, Demon Shadow, am willing to become one of your shadow guards and follow you from now on in order to repay you and your father's kindness. As he spoke, Desolation's Demon Shadow knelt on one knee. This was even more out of Sumo and Yi Wuhui's expectations. The two of them could not help but look at each other. One had to know that the shadow of the Desolation was in existence at the peak of the reincarnation realm. He was even more powerful than Sumo's strongest puppet, Scarlet Child. However, at this time, Huangning actually gave up the opportunity that Sumo had given him to reconstruct his physical body and was willing to become his shadow guard. Yaoing, do you have any requests in the future? Sumo asked. What do you want in the future? The famine demon shadow was stunned. It thought for a moment and then slowly said, First, I am repaying a debt of gratitude. Second, if one day the Demon King can take another step forward, then I am willing to guard the Sanskrit world for the Demon King. Lord of Wisdom. Sumo's lips curled up. Yowing, aren't you afraid of betting on the wrong treasure here? It's not a bet. Desolation's Demon Shadow said solemnly, if the Demon King succeeds, then I have this request. If not, I, Yaoing, will have no regrets. At the same time, to express my sincerity, I am willing to offer a shadow soul. As he spoke, Desolation's Demon Shadow directly shot out a black shadow from between his eyebrows. It was a shadow soul, just like a cultivator's soul blood. One day, if it had any disloyalty, the person with the shadow soul could directly kill it. This action was enough to show Desolation's sincerity. All right. Sumo's eyes narrowed, and then she nodded. Yaoing, if you follow me, I will definitely treat you sincerely. I will temporarily accept this shadow soul. When I succeed, I will definitely return it to you. At the same time, if you want to forge an immortal body, I can do it for you. Sumo raised her hand and directly received the shadow soul in her palm. At the same time, she helped Desolation up. Thank you, Demon King. Desolation said, these two lianbois are items of the demon race. I will give them to you. With your realm, you will be able to control them. As she spoke, Sumo patted her storage bag. Two rays of light appeared in the cave abode of the soul storage altar. It was none other than the Peacock Halberd and Peacock King's Plume that Wang Shui had obtained from the Peacock King. Those were two demon race lianbois. Their value was immeasurable. In a sense, it was even more important than forging an immortal body. Thank you, Demon King. Desolation's Demon Shadow was slightly excited. I have no way to repay you, but I am willing to go through fire and water for the Demon King. After all, not to mention the lianbois, even a venerable divine weapon at the venerable realm could only be found by luck. But Sumo had given it to it once. Yi Wu Hui, who was at the side, could not help but pout. Desolation's Demon Shadow received the two lianbois and directly merged them into its shadow body. Needless to say, Desolation's Demon Shadow was an extremely special existence. Demon Shadow, you will be in charge of protecting Lady Yi from now on. Normally, unless she or I summon you or there is no danger, you do not need to show yourself. Sumo said, yes, Demon Shadow understands. As it spoke, Desolation's Demon Shadow bowed. Looking again, the black shadow instantly fell to the ground, like ice melting. However, the shadow under Yi Wu Hui's feet became thicker. From now on, he will be your servant. Sumo said to Yi Wu Hui. Oh, Yi Wu Hui smiled. This is considered a gift from you? This is a huge gift. A peak rebirth realm expert who possesses two lianbois is definitely an invincible existence below the venerable realm. Even if he meets a venerable, he should be able to block 2 or 3 moves and escape unscathed, right? Yes. Sumo smiled and took out a storage bag at the same time. There are some things in here that you might be able to use. I'm giving them all to you. The venerable flying dagger that was previously refined is also in here. Yi Wu Hui did not stand on ceremony and directly took the storage bag. This was because her previous storage bags were all broken. She was now penniless, so she naturally had to accept all of Sumo's aid. At the same time, she took out the flying dagger. That flying dagger was only 3 inches and as thin as a cicada's wings. It was a venerable divine weapon that was suitable for the current Yi Wu Hui. On the contrary, if it was lianbois, she might not be able to control it. This was also the reason why Sumo gave the lianbois to Desolation's Demon Shadow and let it protect Yi Wu Hui. This dagger is not bad. Yi Wu Hui held it in his hand. From now on, it will be called Regretless Flying Dagger. In the future, if there is a chance, I will refine other Dharma treasures for you. Sumo said again. Good. In the future, don't go back on your word. Yi Wu Hui said. I won't. Sumo smiled. Yi Wu Hui nodded with satisfaction and then said, Sumo, when do you want to go to the Prajnal world? About 10 years. I need to stabilize my realm and make some simple preparations. Sumo thought for a moment. I need to reorganize and refine some Dharma treasures and puppets. Yes, Yi Wu smiled. Just in time. I also need time to organize the things you gave me. Let's split up and prepare. Okay. Sumo nodded. Looking again, Yi Wu waved one hand. In an instant, many of the small puppets in the soul-storing altar cave directly gathered in front of Yi Wu. With a turn of Yi Wu's hand, they had already merged together. The rebirth realm. Yi Wu's magic power was no longer what it used to be. Her puppetry technique was personally taught by Bu Miao Yin, so she naturally had to refine something that was more suitable for her. Sumo, on the other hand, chose to organize in the front cave. The puppets and Dharma treasures in his storage bag were already a bit messy. Divine Peacock Mountain was a tiger's den after all. They had to make proper preparations before they could go. End of this scroll. Chapter 799. In the Galaxy. On the demonic ark stood a man and a woman, both cultivators. The male cultivator was dressed in white and was as beautiful as a demon. The female cultivator was dressed in a blue dress. They were Sumo and Yi Wu. The 10 years were about to end. They had just left the soul storage altar cave for less than 2 months. Now they had arrived at the northern edge of the Dead Soul Star region on the demonic boat. Previously, they had crossed the entire Dead Soul Star region. However, this time, they did not encounter Wang Yu, nor did they stop at the Dust Net 3 planets. The journey was very smooth. At this moment, in front of them was a vast interstellar barrier. This interstellar barrier was 3 million miles wide. It was even wider than the Broken Star Zone. Dust Net, Prajna, Colored Glass, and Swaying were the 4 medium-sized worlds of the Yizong realm. In fact, according to what Li Beihan had said, there were 3,000 worlds like Dust Net in the Yizong realm. Of course, 3,000 was an imaginary number. And back then, the White Robe King had only said that the Yizong realm governed 4 medium-sized worlds. Their words seemed to contradict each other. However, according to Sumo's understanding, the Yizong realm should have 3,000 worlds. However, Dust Net, Prajna, Color Glass, and Swaying were 4 relatively large medium-sized worlds. Or, they were the core worlds of the Yizong realm. Late-stage realm-breaking realm cultivators could travel unimpeded in a medium-sized world. However, to travel between medium-sized worlds, one needed to be at the rebirth state. Unless, like Yi Wu had traveled with Bu Miao Yin to the Yizong realm, they had a rebirth state cultivator to lead them. Sumo and Yi Wu were both above the rebirth state, so they were fine. This interstellar barrier was a bit similar to the chasm that Sumo had used to cross the pure Earth star in her early years. However, there were almost no living creatures in the interstellar barrier. The most dangerous things in the interstellar barrier were the various flying continents, broken stars, and the interstellar chasm. If one's cultivation was not enough, they would be killed or devoured by these things. The living environment in the interstellar barrier was extremely harsh. Cultivators below the rebirth state could not withstand it all. This was also the main reason why there were almost no living creatures here. At this moment, the demonic boat had shrunk to 3 feet. There was a protective barrier around it. Sumo and Yi Wu sat steadily on it. There was no need to control the demonic boat. Ordinary flying continents and shattered stars will be directly dispersed by the demonic ship's aura. Unless a large interstellar rift or a venerable expert appeared, it would be impossible to shake the demonic ship. After leaving the dust world, the star chart in Sumo's mind became useless. However, they had an excellent guide, the Shadow of Famine, because he'd come to the Dead Soul Star region from the Sanskrit realm. Hence, he passed through the interstellar barrier. Thus, Sumo directly asked the desolate demon Shadow if there was anything. Under his guidance, the demonic boat moved forward without any danger. Very quickly, they passed through the interstellar barrier. Hua, at the last moment, the demonic boat seemed to have broken through an invisible water barrier. Everything suddenly became clear. A whole new world unfolded in front of them. It was completely different from the previous darkness. It was a colorful and incomparably resplendent world. At first glance, Sumo almost thought she was looking at the galaxy world. However, its aura was different from the galaxy world. At the same time, it didn't have the vast aura of the galaxy world. Instead, it had a strange feeling. If the brilliance of the galaxy world was like a lotus, then the beauty of the Sanskrit realm was like a kind of poisonous butterfly. Ancestral masters said that the Sanskrit realm has many strange and dazzling demons. They are beautiful and poisonous, so we must be careful. Now, it seems that it's true, Yi Wu said. Back then, wasn't it you who accompanied Bu Miaotian to travel in this world? Sumo asked. Yes, Yi Wu nodded. When we traveled in the Sanskrit realm, it was my sister who accompanied the ancestral master, not me. After that, I only heard some old rumors about the Sanskrit realm. Oh, Sumo nodded. The relationship between Bu Wu and Yi Wu was very strange. In fact, Bu Wu was a true descendant of a Yi family. It was already clear during the battle with Tian Fu. Yi Wu was a puppet of the god. However, the two of them had almost the same memories for a long time, and only then did they become different. As for when they had truly become two separate entities, perhaps only Bu Miaotian knew the best. A puppet of the god was very magical. Bu Xingyun and Yi Wu didn't think of themselves as puppets of the god. However, by chance, Yi Wu found out that the 3-inch puppet sealed her divine soul. In other words, Yi Wu was of a higher level than Bu Xingyun. That was why she wanted to get the 3-inch puppet and become a real cultivator. In fact, even now, in Yi Wu mind, she didn't think of herself as a puppet of the god. The biggest difference between a puppet of the god and an ordinary person was that they thought of themselves as cultivators. Sumo didn't ask too many questions. The demonic ship moved forward. Before this, the shadow of desolation had already provided them with the star map of the Prajna world. After all, the shadow of desolation was a true demon of the Prajna world. The star fields of the Prajna world and the dusty world were different. The dusty world was divided into 4 major star fields: east, west, south, and north. The Prajna world, on the other hand, was divided into 3 major astral realms and 2,000 lesser worlds. The 3 astral realms were naturally the Kuan butterfly astral, the Chilan astral, and the Peacock astral. The Kuan butterfly astral was located in the north of the Prajna world. It occupied more than 1/3 of the Prajna world and had at least 3,000 lesser worlds. Its core world was called the Kuan butterfly astral. The Chilan astral occupied the remaining 1/3 of the Kuan butterfly astral and controlled about 2,000 lesser worlds. Its core world was called the Chilan cloud astral. It got its name because it had 36 extremely special stars. The lesser worlds controlled by the Peacock clan were basically the same as the Chilan clan. Its core world was the Divine Peacock Mountain. The Divine Peacock Mountain was made up of 270 stars. In the Sanskrit world, the other large and small races controlled the remaining 2,000 small worlds. Some of them controlled dozens of stars, while some of them only controlled 1 star. However, these 2,000 lesser worlds were not concentrated. They were scattered throughout the vast Prajna world. According to the coordinates, the closest to Sumo and the others was the Chilan astral, followed by the Peacock astral, and the furthest was naturally the Kuan butterfly astral. This was because Sumo and the others were in the southern star field of the Prajna world. At this time, if they wanted to reach the Divine Peacock Mountain, they first had to pass through a star field belonging to the Chilan astral and then pass through 2 lesser worlds. Sumo and Yi Wu felt that there was no need to rush to the Peacock astral. Although they had the star map and the shadow of desolation to guide them, they still wanted to understand the Prajna world more, especially the Chilan clan. Sumo had interacted with them before. Therefore, the demonic boat moved forward and headed straight for the 5-colored star closest to them. At this time, smoke and dust were rising from the 5-colored star. Chapter 800. The 5-colored star was called South Unicorn. It was the southernmost star of the Chilan astral boundary. Compared to the pure Earth star, this star was more than 5 times larger. South Unicorn star, facing the southern interstellar barrier, faced the Peacock astral boundary in the east. Its geographical location was extremely important. It was the core of the Chelan astral boundary's South Unicorn star field. Hence, a king of the Chelan clan was stationed on this star all year round. Looking from afar in the starry sky, the South Unicorn star was extremely colorful. This star was quite special in the entire Chelan astral boundary. After putting away the demonic boat, Sumo and Yi Wuhui chose to appear in the largest city of the South Unicorn star, Lintu City. Sumo transformed into Sumo's appearance. After all, Xiao Luo's face was too eye-catching. If Sumo showed her true appearance, she might quickly attract the attention of the demon race. Before arriving at the Peacock Mountain, Sumo did not intend to be high-profile. Yi Wuhui did not change his appearance, because there were almost no people in the wisdom world who knew her. Lintu City, the #1 city of the South Unicorn star. It was an immortal city that spanned thousands of miles. There were tens of millions of cultivators, and it was extremely prosperous. Sumo and Yi Wuhui appeared directly in the city center, which was extremely lively. There were all kinds of flying Dharma treasures in the void. There was a square in the center of the city. There was a towering statue in the center of the square. It was 1,000 feet tall, and it was a black Chelan. It had a lion's head, antlers, tiger's eyes, elk's body, dragon scales, and ox's tail. It was said that it was an incarnation of the Chelan divine king. At this moment, there was a wedding in the square. Sumo and Yi Wuhui did not expect to encounter such a lively event. It was an extremely grand scene. The entire square was filled with people, but it was orderly. The cultivators in the middle of the square were divided into several square formations. Every cultivator had an extraordinary bearing. There were many people watching the ceremony. However, they were all outside a transparent boundary wall. In the void, there were all kinds of colorful lights and endless clouds. There was a flower boy on each cloud. They carried bamboo baskets and scattered flower petals. The strange fragrance of flowers permeated the entire square. Sumo and Yi Wuhui quietly landed in the crowd outside the square. "Brother, who's getting married?" Sumo asked a middle-aged man beside her. "Hey, you're from the outer city, right?" The man smiled. "You've joined in the fun today." Such a grand ceremony was a once-in-a-lifetime event. Today is the wedding day of the regional king's third heir. County King's third son? Sumo asked. Southland County King's third son. Of course, it's the South Unicorn County King's third prince. The man laughed. How can there be a second county king on the South Unicorn planet? Which family's female cultivator did you marry? Sumo asked. Hee hee. When the man saw that Sumo was an outsider, he couldn't help but lower his voice and said, "She is marrying the princess of our Southern Unicorn East Seas U clan." It was said that the princess of the U clan was born with a natural charm and was an enchanting woman. Tonight, the crown prince and the princess would definitely have a big battle. Huh. The man's smile was filled with envy and wretchedness. Oh. Sumo smiled apologetically and nodded. Yi Wuhui looked at the man with disdain. The Bori demon race's wedding was a little special. They didn't worship the heaven and earth. They only worshiped the holy saint statue. At this moment, a pair of newlyweds were wearing red robes. The Chelan prince was tall and had an imposing appearance. He looked like a talented man. The princess of the Yu clan was covered with a red veil. Her appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but her figure was graceful and elegant. The Chelan prince was holding the princess' hand. That hand was fair and tender. The princess of the Yu clan was definitely an exquisite woman. The two of them knelt in front of the Chelan statue. "Greetings to the holy saint," Zhan Lisheng shouted loudly. His voice was loud enough to spread throughout the entire southern Unicorn City. The two newlyweds kowtowed thrice. At the same time, the entire plaza was filled with salutes. Flower petals filled the sky, and cheers were like a tide. "Goodbye." Zhan Lisheng formed a seal and pointed to the sky. Whoosh, whoosh. In the air, a 7-colored rainbow bridge appeared directly. The rainbow bridge was more than 10 miles long and led directly to the Duke's mansion. The newlyweds held hands and stepped onto the Rainbow Bridge. A cultivator's wedding was different. Unfortunately, Sumo and Yi Wuhui only made it to the end of the ceremony. The newlyweds had already left. That Zan Li Sheng said loudly. Prince's wedding, Nan Lin congratulates. His Highness is holding a banquet in the 3 great restaurants of Lintu City. Honored guests, please come with us. Since the guests were being led away, the onlookers naturally dispersed. Among them, the most important group of guests was led by a revival-level cultivator who looked like a steward. They went straight to the Duke's mansion. Let's go. The man just now greeted Sumo. Sigh, if I can marry a princess of the Yu clan in this life, my death will be worth it. Brother, your wife is also not bad. The man glanced at Yi Wuhui, then let out a long sigh and left. Sumo looked at Yi Wuhui, and Yi Wuhui looked at Sumo. After being stunned for a while, the two couldn't help but laugh. That big brother looks like a person who cultivates hard, Yi Wuhui said with a smile. Why do you think so? Sumo asked. He is in the late stage of breaking realm, yet he still lusts after women. That means he has been cultivating hard for many years. Yi Wuhui said, otherwise it would be easy to find a female cultivator. Haha, that makes sense. Sumo said. Sumo, let's go to the Duke's mansion. Yi Wuhui said, let's see if we can sneak into the banquet set up by the Southern Unicorn Duke and have a feast. We can also taste the delicacies of this foreign world. What do you think? Hee hee. Sumo laughed. Okay, we can definitely sneak in. Let's see the Qilin Duke's mansion. The two reached an agreement. Immediately, they quietly followed the group, led by the Rebirth Realm cultivator. This group of cultivators had about 100 people. Among them, the weakest was a lifetime immortal. Among them, most of them were Rebirth Realm cultivators, and there were even a few mortals. Obviously, there were people who had passed the 5 blights. For them to dare to attend the wedding banquet after passing the 5 blights, it was enough to show that they had someone to rely on. Therefore, these people were definitely important figures in the Southern Unicorn Star region. Sumo and Yi Wuhui mixed in the group and didn't attract too much attention. After all, everyone wasn't very familiar with each other. Yi Wuhui's realm didn't need to be hidden. Sumo adjusted her realm according to the situation. Soon, they arrived at the Duke's mansion. Everyone took out their invitation cards. However, Sumo and Yi Wuhui didn't have an invitation card. Fortunately, the invitation card was just a certificate and didn't have a name. Sumo? Yi Wuhui looked at Sumo and said, It's fine. Sumo smiled. There were more than 10 people in front of them. Sumo led Yi Wuhui inside. Yi Wuhui's heart was still beating like a drum. Was Sumo preparing to barge in? However, when he saw the door again, Sumo directly took out 2 invitation cards from his pocket. Please. The cultivators at the entrance were very polite. Yi Wuhui was surprised and asked secretly, Sumo, where did you get the invitation cards? Just as she finished speaking, she heard 2 people behind her saying, Where are invitation cards? Hee hee. Sumo transmitted her voice and laughed. My Windwill lineage's secret technique is very powerful. These are all insignificant skills. Yi Wuhui was stunned for a moment, and then nodded. Sumo said it casually, but Yi Wuhui knew that it wasn't insignificant skills. One must know that the people who spoke just now were 2 reincarnation realm cultivators. How could they be ordinary if they could silently take an invitation card from a reincarnation realm cultivator? Yi Wuhui couldn't help but be curious about the senior brothers and sisters of the Windwill lineage that Sumo spoke of. What kind of existences were they? Sumo and Yi Wuhui had just stepped into the mansion and didn't have the time to look around. Suddenly, they heard a woman scream from the backyard. Assassins! Protect the prince, the princess, someone shouted loudly. Everyone's expression changed. Boom! Looking again, the entire backyard was filled with several figures and bloodlight shot into the sky. At the same time, a person in red was thrown into the front yard of the Duke's mansion. That person in red was the Qilin prince. At this moment, his lower body was covered in blood. Chapter 801. Crown Prince Nanlin was crippled. At this moment, Crown Prince Nanlin, who was thrown into the front yard, was pale and had already fainted. Looking at the bloodstains on his lower body and the tattered robe, everyone knew what had happened. Crown Prince Nanlin had been castrated. Hua! The entire prefecture was in an uproar. Liner, the southern Lin prefecture prince, who was originally in the front yard, narrowed his eyes and waved his hand, sweeping up Crown Prince Nanlin. However, Crown Prince Nanlin did not wake up immediately. Everyone quickly gathered around. Sumo and Yi Wuhui looked at each other in shock. Who had the guts to castrate the heir on the wedding day of the heir in the South Lin County Prince's mansion? This was even harder to accept than killing him. This was a kind of naked humiliation. Moreover, Crown Prince Nanlin was an expert at the rebirth realm. Princess of the Yu clan? This was everyone's first reaction, because on this special day, she was the closest person to Crown Prince Nanlin. At the same time, the red light in the backyard of the prefecture was surrounded by 3 cultivators. One must know that this was the Southern Lin Prefecture Prince, Nanlin Prefecture. It could be said that this was one of the most heavily guarded places in the entire Southern Lin Star Domain. Assassins would not be able to escape even if they succeeded. There were 3 rebirth-level experts surrounding the red light. One of them was the supervisor of the prefecture who received Sumo and the others. He was at the rebirth realm. The other 2 cultivators were at the rebirth realm. In fact, this cultivation level was already extremely high. The 3 of them attacked the red light at the same time. Boom! The red light suddenly exploded. Spiritual energy scattered in all directions, and stars fell like rain. However, the thing that exploded was actually a princess of the Yu clan's wedding red robe. There was nothing else. That was not the princess of the Yu clan. The 3 experts were stunned. At the same time, a maid of the Yu clan had already rushed into the bridal chamber. Immediately, a scream could be heard from inside. Princess, at this moment, everything was in chaos. This sudden change was out of the expectations of all the guests. In the backyard, the female cultivator from the county king's mansion followed him into the bridal chamber. Looking again, the princess of the Yu clan was completely naked. She was hung on the beam of the bridal chamber, and the room was a mess. However, she was only stripped of her clothes and cast a spell. Her life was not in danger. At this time, the South Princess was already standing in the room. She was an expert at the 7th layer rebirth realm, so her expression was extremely calm. With a wave of her hand, she conjured a long robe and wrapped it around the princess of the mermaid clan. At the same time, she undid her technique and held her in her arms. Jeaner, the Southern Duke consort, called out. Lin Lang, the princess of the Yu clan, opened her eyes. Her eyes were blank as she called out randomly. Jeaner, who injured you? The Southern princess asked anxiously. Sai Guang. Kai Guang. That princess Yu clan was only a 1-era immortal late stage. At this moment, she seemed to be frightened and shouted loudly. The Southern princess's face darkened. Seal the city. In the front courtyard, the Southern Lin Duke shouted. Looking again, the entire Lin Tu city was instantly surrounded by a soaring light array. Lin Tu city was sealed. At this time, unless it was a venerable like Sumo, it was impossible to leave the city. That was because Lin Tu city's array was a 9th layer rebirth realm array. The Southern Lin Duke was a 9th layer rebirth realm expert. For tens of thousands of years, he had been guarding the southern star region of the Qilin star boundary, with the Southern Lin star as its core. Even the entire Qilin star boundary, the Southern Lin Duke was quite famous. If he hid, thousands of small worlds would tremble. However, today, someone dared to mess with him. Prince Nanlin was his only pure-blooded Qilin child. Unexpectedly, he was castrated today. This enmity was absolutely irreconcilable. Seal the residence. The Southern Lin Duke gave another order. A reincarnation level barrier appeared around the Southern Lin Duke's residence. At the same time, thousands of the Duke's personal guards appeared in the void above the residence. Those guards were all late-stage sea destruction realm. For a moment, murderous intent filled the air. In fact, Everyone knew that the cultivator who castrated Prince Nan Lin could probably turn these thousands of Sea Destruction Realm cultivators into blood mist with a wave of his hand. However, the atmosphere they created caused everyone's expressions to change. "Everyone, please forgive me for today's matter," the Southern Lin Duke said in a deep voice. "Before the real culprit is found, I will have to trouble everyone. No one is allowed to leave the residence. Otherwise, don't blame this Duke for being heartless." Whoosh, whoosh, the Southern Lin Duke's ninth layer rebirth realm pressure instantly spread. At this moment, the entire Southern Lin Duke's residence was under his pressure. Disregarding an existence like Sumo, the Southern Lin Duke was definitely the #1 expert present. The cultivators present were intimidated by the Southern Lin Duke's power, and they also wanted to prove their innocence. Therefore, everyone understood and supported the Southern Lin Duke. "Your Highness, please calm down. We are willing to serve your Highness and find the real culprit," a cultivator shouted, and many cultivators echoed. After all, those who could enter the Southern Lin Duke's residence were not ordinary people. They were basically the nobles of the Southern Lin Star region. The Southern Lin Duke just nodded and did not speak. His expression was extremely ugly. He did not expect that such a thing would actually appear in the Southern Lin Duke's residence. This time he was careless. The Southern Lin Duke's divine sense enveloped the entire residence. However, he did not find any suspicious cultivators. However, the Southern Lin Duke could conclude that the assassin definitely did not leave the Southern Lin Duke's residence. He ordered the city to be sealed just in case. "Sumo, do you know who did it?" Yi Wuhui secretly asked Sumo. "I don't know," Sumo secretly transmitted. However, from just now until now, no one has left the Southern Lin Duke's residence. That assassin is still in the residence. The Southern Lin Duke's order to seal the residence is correct. However, it is definitely not easy to find that person. "Why do you think so?" Yi Wuhui asked. Hee, Sumo sneered. That assassin could castrate the Southern Lin Crown Prince and could actually kill him. However, the other party did not choose to kill them and did not even think of escaping. This means that the other party did not put the Southern Lin Duke in his eyes at all. It seems that the other party only wants to humiliate and anger the Southern Lin Duke. Yi Wuhui said, "He even wants to see a joke." "That's right." Sumo secretly frowned. The other party's methods are really special. This kind of thing happening in the cultivation world is also considered a strange thing. Yi Wuhui also felt the same. At this moment, the two cultivators beside Sumo also transmitted their voices. Unfortunately, their voice transmissions were all heard by Suemo. They were 2 Stage 1 Rebirth Realm cultivators. They did not expect that there was a reverend standing beside them. "Senior brother, this is the 5th of the Qilin clan, right?" a cultivator said. "Yes, the 5th in 1,000 years. They all have the purest bloodline of the Qilin clan." Another cultivator said, "However, the first few were immortal realm. The Southern Lin Crown Prince is a rebirth realm cultivator. If this goes on, won't the Qilin clan become extinct?" Sigh. When Sumo heard their words, she could not help but be slightly stunned. Unexpectedly, this was not the first incident of the Qilin clan being castrated. That would be interesting. Qilin castrated? The corner of Sumo's mouth curved. "What are you laughing at?" Yi Wuhui saw Sumo's expression and transmitted his voice to ask. "Oh, nothing." Sumo shook her head and replied. Then, he casually raised his head and looked not far away. However, suddenly, the back of a woman came into view. It was a woman in green, holding an ancient umbrella. Sumo's eyes flashed with shock. Chapter 802. Once the Qilin clan transformed, they could marry other clans. For example, Prince Nan Lin wanted to marry the princess of the Mermaid clan, and the Qilin third prince wanted to marry the Peacock Yuluo. However, behind these marriages were almost all transactions of power. Their children were not of pure Qilin bloodline. Even if their descendants might be very powerful, they could not inherit the throne of the Qilin clan. The marriage was only to consolidate the ruling position of the Chelan clan. Their parents were Chelan, so they had pure Chelan bloodline. In the Chelan star domain, such bloodlines were decreasing. Looking at the entire Chelan star domain, there were less than 30,000 pure Chelan bloodline. They were a truly rare species. Once, the Chelan king wanted to ban marriage between clans. However, thousands of customs have been formed and were not easy to change. And every pure Chelan bloodline could be a future king. Fortunately, Chelan's lifespan was extremely long. The most ordinary Chelan could live for millions of years. However, they couldn't withstand castration. If you were castrated, what was the use of living for 100 million years? Could it be that the last Chelan king could be a castrator? Thinking about it, one would feel sad for the Chelan clan. In the past, there had been several cases of Chelans being castrated in the Chelan star domain, but the real culprit was not found. However, it did happen in the Southern Unicorn star domain, and they were all relatively low-level Chelans. Therefore, the Southern Unicorn king did not take it seriously. Unexpectedly, misfortune befell him today. The Southern Unicorn Crown Prince was originally going to inherit the position of Duke, but now it was probably impossible, because he was no longer a complete Chelan. Sumo, do you think that the Chelan Crown Prince can't recast his physical body? Yi Wuhui suddenly thought of this possibility. After all, they were all cultivators, and after burying the gods, their physical bodies could be reborn. Thinking about it, being castrated did not seem to be a big deal. Sumo? Thinking of this, Yi Wuhui suddenly felt very funny. However, she called out twice, but Sumo did not answer her. Sumo. Yi Wuhui pulled Sumo's sleeve. At this time, she noticed that Sumo had been looking not far away. Yi Wuhui followed Sumo's gaze. She also saw the back of a woman. Dressed in green, she was tall and had long hair. Unfortunately, the ancient umbrella covered half of the female cultivator's body. Sumo came back to her senses and said casually, "It should be possible for the body to be reborn. But this kind of matter is always a kind of humiliation to the Chelan clan, and it's hard to erase it for the rest of our lives." Sumo, do you know that female cultivator? Yi Wuhui did not continue the topic, because she saw a trace of strangeness in Sumo's eyes. Let's go. Sumo didn't immediately answer Yi Wuhui. Instead, she pulled Yi Wuhui and walked toward the female cultivator. Now that the South Lin region duke had sealed his residence, no one could leave without permission. However, they were not restricted from moving around. After all, most of the cultivators here were important guests. Duke Nanlin had already brought Crown Prince Nanlin to the backyard. The family warriors and guards in the duke's residence were investigating and searching with all their might. The entire duke's residence was huge, and no one could leave the residence. So, they chose to look around in a few courtyards in the residence. In the void, the duke's residence was guarded by thousands of bodyguards, but the residence was relatively loose. Sumo stared at the woman holding the umbrella. Yi Wuhui followed with some doubts. Who was that female cultivator? Could it be a plum blossom spirit? Looking at Sumo's appearance, she must be a very important person. In fact, they were not far from that female cultivator. Sumo was on the east side of the courtyard, and that female cultivator was on the west side of the courtyard. They were only a few dozen feet apart. However, in order not to attract too much attention, Sumo could only walk slowly in a seemingly casual manner. And at this moment, that female cultivator also turned around and walked toward another courtyard. At that moment, Yi Wuhui couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. She took a good look at the umbrella. That bamboo umbrella had a bluish-white background, simple and elegant, and looked ordinary. However, the moment that female cultivator turned around, Yi Wuhui's expression changed, because the surface of that oil paper umbrella was somewhat special. On the surface of the umbrella, there was a vast and boundless ocean, surging with waves, majestic and boundless. A celestial island was located on the ocean, faintly discernible with seabirds soaring, surrounded by clouds and mist. On the surface of the umbrella, there were words, "The sea of bitterness has a limit, and the land of happiness has no worries." Those 8 ancient words caused Yi Wuhui's heart to tremble. A normal Izong cultivator might not understand what it meant, but Yi Wuhui should be considered a cultivator of the 3 realms. How could she not know that umbrella? The original mystic yellow umbrella. That umbrella was absolutely unique in all the realms. Supreme Buddha? Yi Wuhui couldn't help but look at Sumo. At this moment, she understood Sumo's expression just now. At this moment, Sumo's thoughts were almost the same as Yi Wuhui's. That was Yin San's umbrella. That green robe could be Yin San? One must know that back then, Mu shattered the wheel, created the galaxy, and then left with Shun Yin on the immeasurable ship. The Distant Dreams Island became the Distant Dreams planet. Yin San had always lived on the Distant Dreams planet. The sound of her zither resounded throughout the Distant Dreams galaxy for tens of thousands of years. After the reincarnation of the galaxy, Xiao Luo never saw Yun San again. Other than Xiao Huang, he also didn't hear of anyone else going to the Distant Dreams Island. The galaxy was destroyed, and Sumo didn't have any news of the Venerables. He didn't expect that today, at the South Lin Palace, Sumo would actually see such a back view. He was naturally anxious. Sumo really wanted to use her divine sense to lock onto that female cultivator. However, he knew that he couldn't. Needless to say, that primordial yellow umbrella was a top-notch venerable divine weapon. Even an ordinary Lianbua might not have its power. When the primordial yellow umbrella was opened, it was an absolute defense that could block the divine sense of a venerable. Therefore, Sumo couldn't detect anything at all. His only choice was to walk in front of that female cultivator and see for himself. However, as Sumo and Yi Wuhui moved forward, that female cultivator in green also casually walked forward. The primordial yellow umbrella had been blocking her face. The female cultivator in green turned into a moon gate. It was a side garden of the king's palace. Sumo and Yi Wuhui followed closely behind. In the garden, there were mountains and rivers. There were exotic flowers and plants, and there were many guests. However, when Sumo looked at that female cultivator in green again, there was no trace of her at all. Yi Wuhui was stunned. She couldn't see that female cultivator anymore. Actually, they were only a few steps away. However, that female cultivator in green disappeared after entering the garden. The surrounding guests didn't seem to notice anything unusual. Sumo raised her brows and looked left and right, but she couldn't detect anything. "She's a Buddhist reincarnator?" Yi Wuhui asked. Sumo shook her head. "She's not a Star River reincarnator, because she doesn't have the aura of Star River reincarnation." "That's the main body?" Yi Wuhui couldn't help but be shocked. Sumo frowned, but still shook her head. "I can't be sure. From the back, she looks very similar to Yun San. Moreover, her cultivation level is definitely not low." Two people were talking. However, suddenly, there was a sound from the direction of the backyard. Boom! In the backyard of the king's palace, a room suddenly exploded. At the same time, a ball of colorful light flew out. "Your Highness!" someone exclaimed. Looking again, the king of Southern Lin directly turned into a ray of light and rushed towards that ball of colorful light. At the same time, dozens of reincarnation cultivators in the king's palace soared into the sky. Chapter 803. Another change occurred in the Southern Lin Palace. This made Sumo and Yi Wuhui stunned. At this moment, there were no less than 50 to 60 rebirth realm cultivators in the entire palace, including the guests who came to attend the wedding. The moment the mystic light appeared, the Southern Lin Duke had already made his move. Many rebirth realm cultivators naturally couldn't sit back and watch. With a thought, they were already floating in the void. The vast majority of them were here to help the Southern Lin Duke. The entire Southern Lin Palace occupied 1,000 acres. The so-called front yard and backyard were just relative concepts. Although there were thousands of sea destruction realm guards in the void, everyone knew that they were just a warning. An existence that could castrate a rebirth realm cultivator needed at least a rebirth realm cultivator to stop it. Therefore, the rebirth realm cultivators in the palace took the initiative to form a circle. Sumo and Yi Wuhui also rose into the sky, but they didn't see the green-clothed woman. This kind of encirclement formation could be said to be terrifying a total of 57 reincarnation realm cultivators. They automatically formed a rebirth realm boundary. This boundary was guarded by a rebirth realm almighty being not far away from it. Its power was even stronger than the original boundary of the palace. Of course, other than the Southern Lin Duke, who was at the 9th rebirth realm, the rest of the cultivators were below the 5th rebirth realm. Princess Nanlin didn't appear here. Even so, this formation was definitely top-notch. 1/3 of the Southern Lin Star Field's rebirth realm cultivators were here. From this formation, unless the person who castrated the Southern Lin Prince was a venerable, it would be impossible to escape. Whoosh! At this moment, the Southern Lin Duke was already fighting with a mystic light. However, it was an extremely strange feeling, because the opponent was just a mystic light. Actually, that scene made all the cultivators present suck in a cold breath. Sumo narrowed her eyes. To be honest, all of this greatly exceeded her expectations, because that mystic light wasn't a real cultivator, but mystic light clone. Relying on a mystic light clone to contend with the Southern Lin Duke, the real body was at least at the peak of the 9th rebirth realm, or even a venerable. Such a person was enough to destroy the Southern Lin Duke. Boom! However, it was only a mystic light clone after all. How could the South Unicorn Region Prince be an ordinary person? Moreover, he was currently attacking furiously, and his attacks were extremely heavy. 2 punches. The South Unicorn Duke immediately dispersed the profound light. Theoretically, the profound light should have returned to the original body after it dissipated. However, his opponent's technique was very special. The profound light dissipated into thin air, leaving no trace behind. The Southern Unicorn Duke couldn't help but frown. His plan had failed. At the same time, his expression instantly changed. However, it was too late for him to react. Bang! In the backyard of the prince's mansion, there was a cry of surprise, and at the same time, a murderous aura soared into the sky. Looking again, Princess Ninlin was being sacrificed in the air. A powerful and powerless force pervaded the entire palace. Princess Nanlin's eyes were filled with fear. However, her immortal heart had already been pierced. 7 layers of rebirth, Tao, and soul were extinguished. From the looks of it, even at the moment of her death, she did not dare to believe that everything was real. My beloved, the Duke of Nanlin's eyes were filled with blood. He let out a long howl and charged straight at Princess Nanlin. Bang! However, at the moment when the Southern Unicorn Duke charged forward, Princess Nanlin's body directly exploded. At that moment, it was as if a cultivator at the 7 rebirth realm had instantly self-destructed. It was obvious that the cultivator who killed Princess Nanlin had set up a self-destruct formation on her body. She died without an intact corpse. The sky was filled with blood mist, and the hurricane-like power suddenly dispersed. Fortunately, the Southern Unicorn Duke did not lose his mind. At the moment when Princess Nanlin exploded, he had already used his magic treasure. With a thought, he covered his body with armor. It was a set of black armor, of venerable level armor. Millions of years ago, the Southern Unicorn Duke had worn it to open up territory for the Qilin dynasty. Bang! The power of the explosion was like a hurricane, and the Southern Unicorn Duke was the first to bear the brunt. However, he stood in the void and did not move at all. However, the Southern Unicorn Duke's long hair had completely scattered. He was wearing black armor, and his eyes were wide open. At this moment, his entire aura was completely different. At the same time, the Southern Unicorn Duke grabbed the void with one hand. A long black saber appeared in his hand. The blade was as black as ink, and the handle was as black as ink. On the long saber, there was a black dragon soul. Qilin Dragonblade. The other rebirth realm cultivators in the void saw this scene, and their hearts tightened. Many of them knew that the Qilin Dragonblade was another venerable divine weapon of the Southern Unicorn Duke. However, He had not used this black armor and the Chelan Dragon Blade for many years. After all, the entire Chelan galaxy was peaceful and the sea was clear. However, at this moment, the Southern Unicorn Duke understood that the other party was not an ordinary person. Castrating the Southern Unicorn Crown Prince and killing Princess Nanlin. All the cultivators present understood that this was not a simple assassination, but a humiliating and torturous killing. The other party might still attack. After all, the killer definitely did not leave the Southern Unicorn Duke's palace. A Stage 7 Rebirth Realm cultivator was killed directly. This made all the cultivators present feel a strong sense of danger. One had to know that no one could sense the other party's existence now. That assassin was like a ghost, floating in the dark night without making a sound. Would he kill the others? No one could say for sure. Therefore, everyone was on guard, and they secretly tightened their grip on their magic treasures. A Stage 7 Rebirth Realm cultivator was killed, not to mention cultivators below Stage 5 Rebirth Realm. Sumo, what do you think? Did you sense the killer just now? Yi Wuhui felt a little nervous, and she could not help but lean toward Sumo. The unknown was a kind of fear. No, Sumo shook her head. Although she had been paying attention to everything just now, she really did not sense the killer. However, in Sumo's opinion, the Rebirth Realm cultivators floating in the void just now could be eliminated as suspects. First, they were all helping the Southern Unicorn Duke. Second, they did not have the ability to kill Princess Nanlin. Then did Supreme Buddha make a move? Yi Wuhui asked. Yin-san, of course he has the ability, but... Sumo frowned. Actually, she was also wondering if it was Yin-san. However, it was possible for Yin-san to kill Princess Nanlin, but it did not seem like Yin-san's character to castrate the Southern Unicorn Crown Prince. If Yin-san wanted to make a move, it would not be so troublesome. He could easily destroy the Southern Unicorn Duke Palace, the entire Lin 2 city, or even the entire Southern Unicorn planet. From the current situation, the killer was definitely here for revenge. However, whether it was Lu Hun or Yun-san, based on her personality in that life, she would not choose to do so. However, who was the killer? How did she hide in the Southern Unicorn Duke Palace? The killer was very likely to be a venerable. At this moment, the butler of the Southern Unicorn Duke Palace looked at the Southern Unicorn Duke as if asking for his opinion. The Southern Unicorn Duke Palace nodded slightly to him. The butler also nodded. Immediately, he flipped his hand, and a jade scroll appeared in his hand. It was a teleportation jade scroll. He was asking for reinforcements, because the killer's realm was probably invincible in the Southern Unicorn Starfield. However, just as the steward was about to crush the jade slip, a 5-colored light appeared out of thin air a meter in front of him. Poof! The light flashed and hit the center of the eyebrows. Hwah! The crowd was in an uproar. Looking again, the butler was instantly dead, and his soul dissipated. And in the center of his eyebrows, a 5-colored peacock feather that was about a foot long was nailed. Chapter 804. Peacock Plume. 5-colored peacock plume. Seeing the peacock plume, the expressions of all the cultivators present changed. Because the peacock plume was the symbol of the peacock imperial court. 5-colored divine feathers, peacock shape. This was a sentence that the entire Hanya world knew. Peacock race. This was probably a situation that no one had expected. This was because the relationship between the Peacock and Chelan clans had always been pretty good. After all, in the Sanskrit world, the Kuan butterfly race was the most powerful. The Peacock race and Chelan race had to support each other in order to contend against them. The moment he saw the 5-color divine plume, the South Unicorn Duke's expression changed. His first reaction was, how is this possible? However, with the divine feather in front of him, he had no choice but to believe it. However, it was impossible for a cultivator to make a fake 5-color divine feather. Bang! In an instant, the 5-color divine plume exploded. The housekeeper of the Prefecture King's Manor had a level 3 rebirth realm body and exploded just like Princess Nanlin. The Peacock race. All the cultivators present turned to look at the South Unicorn Duke. As soon as the Pentacolor Divine Feather had a problem, things were different. That was because it might not represent a personal grudge, but a declaration of war. Was the Peacock clan declaring war on the Chelan clan? However, this did not make sense. The second-rank prince was on full alert, and his expression was constantly changing. The Southland region prince wasn't an ordinary person. Therefore, he thought about the problem far more deeply than anyone else present. He would not conclude that the peacock race was declaring war just because of a five-colored godly feather. However, he would not underestimate the significance of this five-colored godly feather. The five-color divine feather was the supreme token of the peacock clan. That was something that only peacocks at the fifth rebirth realm and above could use. Ordinary peacocks, even if they had a pure bloodline, would not be able to summon the five-colored divine feathers if their cultivation level was not high enough. What was the intention of the peacock tribe? Why in such a way? Was there any other power behind the peacock race? Instantly, several questions flashed through the Southern Lin royal prince's mind. There were very few peacocks that could do those things in the South Unicorn King's residence. That was because one needed to be at least at the peak of the 9th level of the rebirth realm, or even the venerable realm. In the entire peacock clan, there were probably no more than 10 such cultivators. Among them, there were a few Southern Lin dukes that he was rather familiar with. However, those almighty beings did not seem to need to do so. In fact, there was no need for the entire peacock clan to do so. Unless the Southern Lin duke raised his eyebrows. Because he thought of a possibility. Perhaps all of this was not the intention of the Peacock clan, but the power of their superiors. This thought caused the slightly enraged Southern Unicorn Duke to gradually calm down. Thus, the Southern Lin royal prince took a deep breath and then actually cupped his hands towards the people around him. I wonder which friend from the Peacock clan has come? Would it be possible for you to show yourself? The Peacock Imperial Court and the Chelan Imperial Court had been neighbors for thousands of years. Could it be that today's matter is a misunderstanding? The crown prince was castrated, the princess consort was killed, and the housekeeper died a tragic death. At this moment, the Southern Unicorn Duke was still able to speak in such a calm manner. It could be said that he was flexible. It should be known that he had the pure bloodline of a Chelan and was a lord that guarded the star boundary. The southern region of the Chelan astral plane was basically under his control, and from his question, the other southern Chelan cultivators also smelled a trace of a different flavor. Because if it was really the Peacock clan, the Southern Unicorn Prefecture King wouldn't need to be so courteous. After all, the Peacock King had mysteriously disappeared more than 3 million years ago. The strength of the Peacock clan was greatly damaged. It was said that after that, the divine Peacock Mountain almost had internal strife. Later, a Lotus scholar took action and calmed everything down. However, the current Peacock Queen was an extremely powerful figure. Her methods and boldness surpassed the Peacock King of the past. Therefore, the Peacock Imperial Court stood firm and was still one of the 3 great demon clans. However, it was impossible for the Peacock Imperial Court to easily touch the Chelan clan. On paper, the Chelan clan was still stronger than the Peacock clan. Therefore, those reincarnation-level cultivators did not speak. Sumo and Yiwu Hui were also quietly watching the changes. Giggle, giggle. At this moment, a woman's laughter suddenly came from the void. Looking again, a female cultivator in a black dress had already materialized in the void. The female cultivator in black was tall, with fair skin and a beautiful appearance. Her blue hair fluttered, and her blue eyes were like the sea. She floated gracefully in the air. Her figure was extremely alluring. Xing Luo, when Yiwu Hui saw her, he could not help but be stunned. Because it was the great peacock princess, Xing Luo. However, the aura on her body was far stronger than before. Su Mo furrowed his brows. Peacock Queen. At that moment, all the cultivators of the Southern Unicorn Starfield were shocked. Among them, some had seen Xing Luo. However, that was before Xing Luo became the Peacock Queen. After the disappearance of the Peacock King, Xing Luo sat on the throne. Since then, she rarely appeared. Peacock Star Luo The Southern Unicorn Duke was also stunned. Just now he thought of a few almighty peacocks, but he never thought that Xing Luo would appear. Xing Luo had become a venerable a million years ago. That was no secret. At this moment, Xing Luo's venerable aura spread out, causing all the Southern Unicorn cultivators to tremble. Because at this moment, if Xing Luo wanted to, none of them would live. Southern Unicorn Duke, long time no see. Xing Luo smiled insincerely. Southern Unicorn greets your majesty. The Southern Unicorn Duke bowed slightly and then frowned. We haven't seen each other for many years. I didn't expect your majesty to send such a great gift today. My Qilin clan is overwhelmed by the favor. How will we repay you in the future? Everyone understood the Southern Unicorn Duke's words. The Qilin clan was not afraid of the Peacock clan. The Southern Unicorn Duke was only worried about the power behind the Peacock clan. That was why his words had a hidden meaning. Oh, he. Xing Luo could not help but giggle. Southern Unicorn Duke, your words are interesting. However, this gift is not from me. Oh, the Southern Unicorn Duke's expression changed. It seemed that what he was worried about had happened. I was only following orders. I had to kill him. Xing Luo's lips curled. Following orders? The Southern Unicorn Duke said, Whose orders? Oof. Xing Luo's expression darkened. Southern Unicorn Duke, aren't you asking the obvious? Within Yizong, who is in charge of our demon race, who else can make this lord obey orders? This, the Southern Unicorn Duke did not know, but he felt that it was unlikely. Venerable Lotus has something else to say. Xing Luo paused. The Southern Unicorn Duke was puzzled, but he still bowed and said, Southern Unicorn, listen carefully. The Qilin clan has a bad habit of intermarriage and impure bloodline. How can they prosper? Today, we will teach them a lesson to avoid future mistakes. I hope Southern Unicorn can conduct himself with dignity. The Southern Unicorn Duke frowned and could not help but ask, But what is the princess's crime? How can there be no fault in not teaching a child? Xing Luo said coldly, This time, it is the princess. Next time, it will be the Southern Unicorn Duke. If the Qilin clan does not change their bad habits, I am afraid I will have to follow orders to the Qilin Cloud World. The Peacock clan does not dare to go against Venerable Lotus. This time, I am afraid it is just a warning. There must be something wrong with the Qilin clan. Southern Unicorn, do you understand? Xing Luo's aura suddenly dispersed. That was the pure aura of a venerable. In an instant, the Southern Unicorn Duke's face turned pale. How could a rebirth realm cultivator resist a venerable? Although he felt that there were some loopholes in Xing Luo's words, it was easy for her to kill him now. All of this was more like the Peacock clan's conspiracy. Southern Unicorn understands. The Southern Unicorn Duke could only say respectfully. Xing Luo heard and nodded slightly. Southern Unicorn, let me give you a piece of advice. The Qilin clan should behave themselves. Don't think that the Venerable Lotus doesn't know what you are doing. The Peacock clan does not want to see the Qilin clan destroyed and the foreign races rise. Farewell. After saying that, Xing Luo looked coldly at the Southern Unicorn Duke and slowly walked out of the Southern Unicorn Palace. At that moment, no one dared to stop her, and no one could stop her. Yi Wuhui could not help but look at Sumo, because even Sumo did not stop her. Chapter 805. In the void above the Southern Lin Palace, many soldiers were lined up. However, not even the 50 reincarnation state cultivators dared to stop Xing Luo, let alone the bodyguards at the Sea Destruction Realm. Under the pressure of starfall, they automatically scattered. The corners of Fallen Star's mouth curled up as she left calmly. Your Highness, naturally, there were many cultivators who looked at the Southern Unicorn Duke with dissatisfaction, because letting the Peacock Star fall just like that was somewhat inexcusable. After all, everything she said was just her side of the story. The customs of the Qilin had been like this since ancient times. Was there a need for the Lotus scholars of the Wisdom Realm to interfere? Moreover, if Venerable Lotus wanted to intervene, why didn't he just look for the Qilin King? Why didn't they directly go to the Chelan cloud world? Warning? Starting from a southern unicorn duke, he felt a little strange. After all, he was just a regional prince. This was what many of the cultivators present were thinking. But since the Southland region duke didn't say anything, they naturally couldn't do anything. Open the gates. Farewell, Supreme Peacock King. The Southern Unicorn Duke glanced at the cultivator who spoke just now, shook his head lightly, and shouted loudly. Who? Hua. Following the voice of the South Lin region king, the entire Lin Two Cities array was activated. Hee. Fallen Star's voice rang out. Southern Lin King, a wise man submits to circumstances. This prince bids farewell again. Fallen Star's aura instantly vanished from Chelan Head City. The countenance of the South Lin region Duke turned ashen. Everyone, if we don't let her go today, our South Unicorn planet might not even be able to keep it. The South Unicorn Duke looked at all the cultivators present. Regardless of whether she is acting on Venerable Lotus's decree or not, she is still a venerable. Who can stop her? Peacock Clan, are you going too far? The inner guard who had fought with the prince's mansion's chief steward said hatefully. Huh? The Southern Unicorn Duke laughed coldly. Gray Horse, there's no need to be angry. Although she has left planet South Unicorn, whether she can return to Peacock Galaxy is still a question. The Chelan clan is already preparing to kill her. As he spoke, he looked at the Southern Lin region prince and flipped his hand. At some point, a teleportation jade slip in his palm had been crushed. Its light had long since dimmed. It seemed like it had been destroyed for some time. Sumo couldn't help but raise her eyebrows when she saw this. That jade slip should have been crushed when the Southern Unicorn Duke and the steward locked gazes. It turned out that the manager was just a cover. Of course, if he wasn't killed, the news would naturally spread. However, at that time, the Southern Lin royal prince had already made preparations for both sides. The steward had successfully attracted Fallen Star's attention, so the Southern Lin Duke had already sent a message to the Chelan Cloud Realm. This was probably the main reason why the Southern Unicorn Duke had swallowed his anger and allowed Xinghua to leave. In my Chelan star boundary, how can we allow him to do as he pleases? The South Unicorn County King sneered. Why wouldn't I believe in Venerable Lotus's order? One Supreme Peacock, do you think I Chelan have 5? Gray Centipede, pass down my order. Summon 3,000 Black Scale Army back to Southern Scale Planet. Follow me into battle in an hour. At the same time, transfer the second prince and third prince to gather their troops and head for the 7-star region northeast of Southern Unicorn. This subordinate understands. Gray Horse answered. Red God, Ink General, your subordinates are here. 2 cultivators at the 5th stage rebirth realm knelt on one knee in front of the Southern Lin Duke. From today onwards, you don't have to guard the city. Instead, guard the regional king's mansion. You will be in charge of the Duke's mansion's bodyguards. You must protect Crown Prince Nan Lin. The Southern Lin Duke looked at the 2 generals and sighed. If the Crown Prince is here, you will be here. If he isn't here, you don't have to come and see me. Your Highness, don't worry. The 2 of us swear to protect the Crown Prince with our lives. Red God and Ink General said in a clear voice. The Southern Lin Duke issued a series of orders. It could be said that the dispatch was orderly and methodical, and this wedding directly turned into a funeral. The Duke's mansion and Chelan City were lifted, but the entire Southern Scale Star region was in a state of war. Many of the guests then dispersed. After all, many of them had important positions and had their own arrangements. Sumo pulled Yi Wu Hui and quietly left. It was very easy for a supremacy like him to leave without a trace. Moreover, once Fallen Star appeared, no one would care about others. Sumo's figure moved and directly left Chelan City with Yi Wu Hui. With another flash, they directly left Southern Scale Star. In the vast galaxy, the demonic ship flew. Sumo and Yi Wu Hui had already gone straight to the Northeast Star region of Southern Scale Star region, because through the Northeast Star region, they would reach Peacock Star region. However, unless the demonic ship used an interstellar jump, there was still an extremely long journey. Sumo, are we chasing after Fallen Star? Yi Wu Hui asked. Yes. Sumo nodded. But she is one step ahead. I don't know if the direction is correct. Since you want to chase after her, why didn't you stop her just now? Yi Wuhui was slightly puzzled. You should understand that if you had attacked just now, you could rely on the Qilin clan's power to definitely capture Fallen Star. If you capture her, you might be able to ask for Sister Wu Er's whereabouts. Sumo shook her head. If we capture Fallen Star, it is naturally a good thing. But what? Yi Wuhui said. But don't you feel that Fallen Star is a little strange? Sumo laughed. Strange? Yi Wuhui frowned. What's strange about it? She seems to be missing something. Sumo said. Huh? Yi Wuhui was stunned. Then he immediately said, You mean nine-tailed raccoon? Yes. Sumo nodded. Hee. Yi Wuhui laughed. What's strange about it? HNG doesn't stay on your shoulder every day, right? Fallen Star might not be hugging a cat every day. That's different. Sumo laughed. After all, cats are more suitable as pets than pigs. You're discriminating against pets. Yi Wuhui laughed. At that moment, HNG heard it too. She crawled out of Sumo's arms and pouted. Why am I inferior to a cat? Sumo shook her head and laughed. Then she said to Yi Wuhui, Actually, I want to say that the female cultivator isn't Fallen Star. What? Yi Wuhui was stunned. She's not Fallen Star? Then who is she? Can a supremacy be impersonated? We need to verify who she is. She can't impersonate a supremacy. She is indeed a supremacy. In the era of the three realms, supremacies actually have no ranks, because they are at the peak. However, if she's in Yizong, I feel that she should be a second-layer supremacy. A second-layer supremacy. What does that mean? Yi Wuhui said. How is she compared to you? Compared to me? Sumo laughed. If we compare her to the current me, in terms of realm, we should be on par. If we compare her to the past me, she's still too far away. Oh? Then what about the other supremacies of the three realms? Yi Wuhui asked again. And she can't compare to any of them. Sumo shook her head. From what I know, if the supremacies of the three realms come to Yizong world, they are comparable to the peak ninth-layer supremacies here. Of course, AMU is the strongest. Songhai once told Sumo that he estimated that AMU's realm should be the lowest Lotus Knight. However, in Sumo's opinion, the supremacies of the three realms could all compete with a low-level Lotus Knight. AMU was definitely not a low-level Lotus Knight. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.